say more about this, but there's a reason why Human Services has a surplus, and that is, first of all, it's the biggest department that we have. Second of all, it has to do with all sorts and conditions of human activity and behavior. And Bill Topol can't look at a budget and say, well, I know I'm going to have 5 kids in juvenile detention and 7 kids in foster care, and I have this many going to, there's no way of predicting that stuff. So you do the best you can, and then the remuneration that we get back from the state and from the federal government can sometimes be 13 to 17 or 18 months out. So you pay all this stuff out, and you don't know when, you know you're going to get reimbursed something. You don't know how much, and nobody knows how much. And if you ask, how do you figure this out? They say it's better if you don't ask. So you don't know when it's coming, and you don't know to what percentage you're going to get reimbursed. But it really can take close to a year and a half before you see some things being paid back. There's a reason why there is a surplus every year. Thank God. That means that we haven't had as bad a year as we might have hoped or might have thought we could have had with kiddos needing things, or adults with special needs. So, and then the department gives back when they find out they've got money. They give back to the county. So it's not like they're building a slush fund. So that's all I want to say. Those are my 3 things: the fair, the department heads, and Human Services. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. We had to do one technical change here, so I apologize for a slight lapse there. I'll next call on Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. I would just like to comment that when Mike took over as president of the fair, they were like $35,000 behind. They couldn't even pay all their bills. Supervisor Egan ran the fair for many years, and the board actually had to take loans out to get the fair started, because you plan all the stuff and you get rainy days, and they actually don't get enough revenue to cover the expenses. So, you know, I don't think we should take anything away from that fair. They're all volunteers. Every penny that we give them goes to basically the fair for basically the 4-H, it just seemed good when I would go through there and I would see those kids doing something other than playing on an iPhone. You know, you actually see them tending to their animals, and they were knowledgeable. You could ask them any question you wanted, you know. And I always thought, well, you know, do all counties subsidize the fair? And when I looked into it, 99% of the counties subsidize the fair. They don't make money. That's why they're called a county fair, because the county basically helps to keep the fair running. And I'd like to thank Mike and all his volunteers. They're volunteers. They don't get paid. They're, you know, like basically we get $75 today. They get absolutely nothing. They donate their time. They basically didn't know how they were going to get the kids to show their projects that they worked so hard at. They went through and got a virtual fair set up so they could still show their projects. They had the animal sale, because you buy your animal in January and February to sell in August. You know, what do you do with that animal? You put all that time and money in there, and it is for their college and things like that. So I would recommend not cutting anything from the fair budget, as they do a wonderful job, and I think it's a great thing for our community.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Schneider, followed by Supervisor Albrecht. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of fun being chair of the Extension Committee. I don't have to say a word. I've got the whole committee stepping up for the fair. But it's a great deal, and all I can do is echo what Karen and Steve just said. These guys work their butts off. For all they get is satisfaction, and we have to continue to provide them with the means to gain that satisfaction, and do everything they can for the kids in the 4-H. So I too just want to echo Karen and Steve, saying there's no way we should even be considering lowering anything that we give to the fair every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Schneider. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht. Please go ahead, Supervisor Albrecht. If you can go ahead and unmute your mic, Supervisor Albrecht.
Just wanted to report that East Central Planning Commission is under new leadership and they're doing very well. And I'd like to compliment Melissa Kramer Patke for doing such a good job of keeping it up. It was mentioned last night, somebody had asked a question about the East Central Planning Commission is under good leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll close that portion of the agenda. We'll move on to the next item, which is County Board Chairman's report. So just two quick things. One's just a follow-up from a question from yesterday in regards to the WCA dues. I can confirm with you that the WCA dues are unchanged from last year. Just so everyone's aware, the WCA dues are based on populations of counties. So when the WCA Board of Directors votes, they're actually voting on the dues for counties of specific population groups. And so they voted this year to make those dues unchanged. So I can confirm for everyone that the dues for the upcoming year are the same as the prior. That was a question that was asked yesterday. And then just a reminder of our process for today and tomorrow. So on the agenda, as you'll see today, we start with the district attorney and we continue to work our way down all the way through solid waste. That's assuming we get through all of those reviews today. I would anticipate that we will. If we were not to, however, then we would continue tomorrow morning at 8:30. Assuming we do wrap up our reviews today, then we would effectively be adjourned till 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Just as a reminder to everyone on the amendments process, however, you have an instructional sheet on how you can submit an amendment, and there are certain data points that the Finance Department is looking for. So if you do want to submit an amendment, first of all, you can submit it at any time from now up to 10 a.m. tomorrow. The sooner the better, certainly, because then Finance Department has as much opportunity and length of time to be able to review it and provide feedback and input and prepare it, of course. But you do have up until 10 a.m. tomorrow. You can actually email that, but you also have some contact numbers on that sheet for the Finance Department if you need to call them directly. Those will all be collected by 10 a.m. tomorrow, and then the Finance Department will do the final preparations for those amendments and submit them to all of you by 2 p.m. as well as the
Supervisor Paul,
2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. That gives everyone at least 2 hours to be able to review them before we once again convene at 4 p.m. tomorrow. So the one thing I would remind folks is that the debate in regards to any amendment would actually occur tomorrow. I know that there are some discussions about amendments that are already planned for. That debate on amendments would occur tomorrow at 4 p.m. because, of course, not everyone will have seen what potential amendments there will be until tomorrow. So just wanted to kind of review that process with everyone before we get started. And before we do get started, I'll open it up for any questions from any county supervisor before we start the budget reviews today. I see Supervisor Eisen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a problem. I had some sound feedback, and I didn't hear a word that Supervisor Albrecht said.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the mic for Supervisor Albrecht. He was giving an update on East Central Wisconsin Planning Commission, but please, Supervisor Albrecht, if you could give your update about East Central one more time.
I just wanted to report that I'm on the steering committee, and Melissa Patke is under new leadership, and she's doing a fine job.
Very good. Thank you again, Supervisor Albrecht.
It's the same issue. I could hear some of what he said, but he's got a feedback problem. Is he attached twice?
No.
No, I'm getting feedback from his communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht again, and thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Okay, so just as a reminder to everyone, what's on the table is the 2021 budget. So we did have a motion and a second yesterday. So we've started the reviews, and now we will continue those reviews today. So the first one is District Attorney. So I will turn it over to the County Executive, Executive Harris.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
The District Attorney's budget is on page 216. And then there were questions about dues, some of which were answered this morning. But I did want to mention that East Central Regional Planning, which is in the general unclassified, their dues have actually dropped from 205,000 down to 153,000. And that relates to the fact that they're without the director there, but they did pass on that savings to us. So getting back to the district attorney, the page with the staffing requirements, and by the way, that page also always lists what the change in levy is for the department. But the district attorney will be 18 full-time employees, and that's an increase of 1 employee from 2020. And there's a list of significant changes on page 217.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the District Attorney's departmental budget. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My reference is to page 222. On page 222, there is a new object for 2021, and that is motor fuel 53548. And it's only $1,000, but what is the new motor fuel object? The old motor fuel object is 73548, and that's the same as last year, but what's the new one?
I don't know if the district attorney, Christian Gossett's there, maybe he can answer that question.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
District Attorney Gossett, would you be able to answer that question? I'll call on the Finance Director, Vicki Fitzgerald. Director Fitzgerald, would you be able to answer that question?
I sure can. Motor fuel 73548 is when they fuel up countywide, like with the highway department and so forth. So it's interdepartmental. The 53548 motor fuel is when they go in to a gas station or so forth, that it's not within the county. So it's the same motor fuel, but it's just where they get the source from.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Director Fitzgerald, and thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question in regards to the Winnebago County Connect program. I know that we are looking to get that ramped up, hopefully before the end of the year. And has there been any communication with not just Carol Morak, but the other case manager that the project position with the Department of Health and Human Services, and are we pretty much ready to hit the ground running, and are they ready to take referrals for the jail diversion concept going forward?
Actually just had a conversation with Bill Topel. That person works for the Human Service Department. And I talked to Bill Topel yesterday about that. They have lined up several people that are ready to start the program. They don't actually have people from other agencies that are ready to work in our location. But she'll be working the first dozen or so participants, giving them referrals to other agencies or doing it virtually. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, initially Christian had 2 people from the state lined up for 1/2 a day each, but I don't think they're available during the pandemic. And then the other agencies, he had agencies in mind but I don't believe he actually had commitments from them to provide those people. So once we have the space, I think that'll be easier to get those people. If they don't come into our space to work, then they'll try and do warm handoffs, although right now it may have to be virtual.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And I guess I do have another question, not relating to this, but in regards to the budget, the state budget, in regards to assisted district attorneys. Has there been any impact, since then, as there's been more ADAs allowed for the district attorney? Wanted to know if the district attorney can answer that question.
Can you guys hear us now?
Yes, we hear you.
Yep.
Okay, I apologize. We had some technical difficulties and had to switch over to a different system here. So apparently the microphone wasn't working on the other system. So we added we were given 2 additional prosecutors. We filled both of those positions, one with a brand new prosecutor, one with a prosecutor with a few months experience. One of those people recently left. And so a lot of the time so far has been in training. It takes quite a bit of time to get prosecutors up to speed. But what we ended up doing was increasing the resources that we had allocated to drug and property crimes. I think everybody's aware of the continued struggles with the opioid crisis. The pandemic has certainly made all of that worse. So we've added additional resources there. We've also added one additional resource there. Then we added the other resource to the assault of crimes unit. That probably is unfortunately well-timed as well, as I'm sure people have seen the headlines, and it's been kind of a rough year all the way around in the criminal justice system. As I indicated, one of those people did leave, so we're short an attorney, but next year we'll also be adding another victim witness person, which will help with Marcy's Law. Marcy's Law has added a significant amount of work, I guess, to every criminal case that has a victim. It's all good. It's good changes, but it does take a considerable amount of time. So far we've been integrating people and readjusting to the new allocations, but I think everything is going smoothly. We're currently working with UW Oshkosh. We've been creating a new allocation formula for state use for prosecutor resources, which we can talk about at some other time, but the idea is basically to de-incentivize the criminal justice system from charging too many cases. So we continue to work on progressive reforms as we go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Gossett, and thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I'm very interested, of course, Christian, you know that I'm going to be your nemesis on this. And that is what kind of metrics are you going to be measuring, and will you be prepared to report that through the Judiciary Committee before the program gets started?
Before the Connect program gets started?
I'm sorry, before your programmatic changes get started, both Connect and then with the opioid intervention plan.
So the opioid intervention plan, that's being handled by New York University. They're our research grant partner on it. So New York University will be setting up the metrics and the evaluation. They're, I believe, collecting data at this point in time. On the Connect program, we have a data analyst that is starting this week, Thursday, and one of her first priorities is going to be to familiarize herself with the Connect program and set all of those parameters out. She has a background in criminal justice as well as research psychology, and has done all sorts of statistical analyses for the university.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Executive Harris, anything further on the District Attorney's budget?
No, I think we're ready to move ahead to Clerk of the Courts. On page 229 is her staffing.
Very good. Thank you again, District Attorney Gossett.
The Clerk of the Courts is budgeted for 42 full-time positions and 2 part-time positions, the same as last year. The levy's increasing 28,331, which is only 1.32%.
We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the Clerk of Courts departmental budget. Any questions from any county supervisor? Being none, we'll go ahead and move to the next departmental budget, sheriff and jail improvements.
That's on page 245 is where the chart of personnel. And they're actually decreasing 1 full-time position down to 202 and 5 part-time positions for a total of 207 employees. Their levy's going up $150,581, but that's only 0.7 of 1%. So a very small increase.
We'll open it up for any questions from the sheriff's budget and the jail improvement fund. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Mr. Chairman, I have expressed concern before, and I'm addressing the issue at this time. My concern is on page 251 of the budget detail, expense, particularly object 51150, wage turnover savings of $50,000, and object 51250, fringe turnover savings of $50,000. My discussion probably stretches out to the other 4 departments that also declare turnover savings. But in respect to this particular sheriff's budget, my question would be, what's going to happen to that $100,000 if we don't fill those positions? Is that going to just be an additional general fund unaccounted for monies?
Well, let me try and touch on that again. I actually spoke about it a little bit last night, that when you have a small department and you have a vacancy, you budget that salary as if you were going to fill that vacancy right away. And typically we budget a family coverage on the health insurance. That way, if they do hire someone right away and they take the family health insurance, that their budget will cover their expected expenses. We build the other budgets in the same fashion, but the larger the department, the more probability that some of those positions won't be filled the entire time. And especially in an area like the sheriff's, where you have turnover in things like dispatch, intake, and corrections. We then build in an adjustment, a downward adjustment in that salary to put in a reasonable expectation for the vacancies that will remain. Those are only estimates, but it helps bring the budgets in line with what's likely to actually happen. So that's why we put the 50,000 in there for wages and for benefits. That's an estimate of savings we'll enjoy based on some positions not being filled the entire time.
Okay, so it's going to be extra. My particular take and perspective in respect to wage and fringe turnover savings is that I would prefer, or at least unless you convince me before the amendment portion comes, I would prefer to use the point in time payroll records. So when we're doing a budget, if you don't have these positions filled and you've got vacancies, I will budget for them. Take that money out. This county board has never denied in the 15 years, 14 years I've served on this board, the county board has never denied a department head extra money to fill a position or otherwise. If it's the will of the board that it's more convenient not to have to address these issues as you go along and just throw in an extra $863,000 because that's the amount of money that we're overfunding wages and fringes. I'll rest my case and I'll listen to what other people have to say in respect to this.
I do need to comment for the public's benefit. Those two $50,000 adjustments are not increases to spending, they're decreases to spending, which allows us to use less levy in the department. And they are in fact our best estimates of how much payroll and benefits won't be spent on positions that we're trying to fill, but which are not filled.
Fringes, it's a padding. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 246, Sheriff Motz, it says that the 2021 sheriff budget is taking an optimistic approach to revenues. Now that Rock and Country USA have filed for bankruptcy, is your optimism waning a little bit?
We're not sure what type of bankruptcy that is at this point, whether or not they're going to be able to reorganize and hold the events. I think optimistic, it's money in, money out. So it's not tax levy money. So the vendor pays us and we pay the employees for the services that we provide. With COVID not knowing when it's going to end, I think outdoor events will become more popular and people will look to those types of venues for concerts. So whether or not the current vendor is providing the concert, there could be someone in the wings because the infrastructure is all there.
All right, thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor Schneider. And thank you, Sheriff Motz. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I just like to comment that I had a cousin at Parkview and I talked to some of the CNAs there and I asked them if there's one thing that they could change, what they would change. And most of them, what they said is it's hard when you have to work shorthanded. I realize the county saves money. That's great. You know, we can save $400,000 on labor at Parkview, but those CNAs or, you know, the correction officers at the jail, the work's still got to be done. It doesn't stop. Doesn't matter if you got 10 people or if you got 12, if you got 8, you're going to get the work done. It's just that you're going to have to work a little harder. You're going to have to work a little faster. You're going to basically maybe work through your break. You're going to feel bad and help them maybe even during your lunch hour. So the county is great. It's a savings to the county. But I think when we look at our turnover rate, that's part of the reason why people leave, because they feel that we take advantage of them. We don't replace the people fast enough. We don't keep an extra 1 or 2 people on board because we have the staffing for $400,000. We really could have 8 extra CNAs, and when one quit, we would have a cushion. But instead, we look at the savings to our budget and not the people that basically are working for us. So I think we need to adjust that, and we need to basically make sure that the departments are somewhat fully staffed. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender.
I'd like to comment on that if it's possible, just because this is an area that's very difficult. We are constantly hiring CNAs, and we would love to have all the positions we have posted filled. It's an extremely difficult thing because there's such a severe shortage of CNAs. We just went through the first rounds of interviews of candidates to be the new director of the nursing home. Our excellent director is leaving for another career opportunity. But one of the questions that most of the candidates asked us was how much contract nursing do we use? Because the CNA shortage is so severe throughout the industry that most nursing homes are having to contract with agencies at a much higher cost to fill the gaps in their schedules. So it's a universal problem. Our turnover is not high for the industry, although it's extraordinarily high. And what Mr. Bender says is exactly correct. Working shorthanded puts pressure on the remaining staff and can even add to the turnover. But that's a nursing home wide experience that's going on right now. And actually, because we have fringe benefits way beyond what the private sector nursing homes have, our nursing home employees are compensated significantly more on their total package. But with the young people coming into the industry and the amount of opportunity to move around, long-term benefits like pensions and the health insurance may not have the value to them that it has to other employees because they're young, healthy, and not thinking about retirement. But it's a universal problem, and we have it, but we have it in a less severe situation than what most private sector nursing homes and even probably most of our peers.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender, and thank you, Executive Harris. I'll next call on Supervisor Gabbert. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbert.
I have one quick question for Sheriff Motz. On page 250, Intergovernmental Services Board of Prisoners. I just need an explanation of what that is.
Given our current jail counts, we are able to board prisoners for the state of Wisconsin, both state inmates and ES sanctions, which is probation parole sanction inmates. So we use that revenue to offset our operating costs.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbert. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that at the Judicial and Public Safety Committee, you also worked with the county clerk in regards to voting in the jail. Wanted to know if you could kind of reiterate what you spoke about at that committee meeting to the county board here, and just want to make sure that the process is ready to go.
Yes, we had updated our policy even previous to that particular question at Judiciary and Public Safety. The inmates are informed through written communication and with our deputies that are working in the particular pods that if they wish to vote, we will walk them through the process of getting an absentee ballot. And regardless of where they live, we will contact the clerk that is responsible for mailing the ballot to them, and we'll also provide whatever identification that they have in their property to that clerk, and they can vote. We make sure that the ballot is sent back.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. I see no other call-ins. Before we conclude the sheriff's budget, Sheriff Motz, anything else you want to add?
Just regarding Supervisor Eisen's comments, I understand what he's saying, but with the larger department, it's very ebb and flow. Our vacancies ebb and flow throughout all of the divisions. So it is difficult to know where we're going to end up at the end of the year when you look at total vacancies and the money that is saved or not paid out and the money that is paid out. So it's a extremely difficult thing to budget for. We are making progress. We have currently 7 vacancies in the entire agency. So out of 207, we have 7 vacancies, but we have an ongoing hiring process and hope to get those filled in a very short time frame.
Very good. Thank you, Sheriff Motz. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the sheriff departmental budget and the improvement fund. Thanks again, Sheriff Motz, for being here. All right, so we'll move on now next to the coroner's departmental budget. Executive Harris?
The coroner's staffing chart is on page 267. It's going from 2 employees, 1 full-time and 1 part-time. But remember, there also were deputies that weren't shown as employees, to 2 full-time and 2 part-time, because they're making deputy positions full-time employees rather than having them operate on per diems. The levy's going up $36,649, but probably about 75 to 80% of that is from the purchase of a vehicle.
We'll open it up for any questions or thoughts in regards to the coroner's budget. I see a couple of call-ins. First, I'll call on Supervisor Brunn, followed by Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Brunn. And you can go ahead and...
Yes, this is a procedural question. I would prefer on our budgets, rather than have a part-time and full-time position, have it FTE equivalents. So we know just how much part-time person is versus this. It's pretty wide open, not just on this particular budget, but on other ones too. And if we had an FTE equivalent versus the part-time, full-time, I think we would understand the staffing better. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunn. I've seen that approach in other budgets as well, so thanks for the comment. I'll next call on Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go to a little bit of a dark place here, but I know that we have seen a trend in opioid overdoses this year, and that we've in fact already seen more than double than what we did in 2019. And I spoke with Kim in your office last week, and from what I understand, we're looking at 25 right now with a possibility of 8 more. There's still some evidence that still needs to be, information that still needs to be placed to make that conclusive. Wanted to know how that has been affecting your office, if there's any increase in demand. Has this additional staff helped out with that particular area?
Coroner Bremer, would you be able to answer that question?
Absolutely. We have actually since had an additional overdose, so that number keeps climbing, or suspected. We have to wait for the toxicology, obviously, to come back on it. The greatest impact that it's had, not only the time that the deputies are out in the field, but the biggest impact has been on our autopsy budget, which we are looking obviously to increase for the 2021 budget to the 140,000 versus the 128.5. That's kind of what we projected this year that we were going to hit. And it's pretty apparent that with the overdoses and the increase in homicides, that we're even going to go over that amount. So it has made the autopsies, that cost, it's made a great impact as far as that goes.
Thank you for that. Oh, go ahead.
If I may add to that, in your comment, you did say extra staff. She doesn't have extra staff. She's just changing it from per diem to employee. So I just want to let you know it's not that she's adding 2 more employees. Well, so to speak.
Right. All right. Thank you. One follow-up question too. Have we seen an increase in suicides over the last year as well?
The beginning of the year, we had seen an increase over the number of last year's suicides, but since then, thank goodness, that has kind of slowed down throughout the year. Last year we had, oops, I wrote them down. We had 18 suicides total. As of this year, we have 18. So we still have 2 months to get through yet. So I'm assuming there will be an increase, but not the triple the amount that we're seeing in the overdoses.
Okay, excellent. And I just want to make a comment that it's really nice to see the coroner here at the budget meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. And thank you, Coroner Bremer. I believe there was one other call on Supervisor Eisen. I believe you had a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the coroner to share with us the progress being made on converting the coroner into a medical examiner. I know this was addressed at the Public Safety Committee meeting, but I think the whole county board deserves to know what's up.
As far as the progress to move us to a medical examiner's office, right now we've just been trying to update our equipment and the things that are available to us, but changing the employees from per diem to actually full-time and part-time employees versus appointments, that is a huge step in moving towards the ME system. I can't, transitioning to the ME system, I don't think is going to take, you know, a lot of, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. There's not a lot of steps, I don't think, to it, because the ME system is run pretty much the same as the coroner system.
Okay,
You know,
will
it's just a
that work out at the re-election of the coroner time, or is that going to happen, say, the 1st of January 2022?
I guess we haven't really discussed that as far as
Okay.
that part goes. So I am continuing on getting my certification, finishing the forensic degree that I have 2 classes. So I'm in the process of finishing that because I'm hoping to at least be considered as an applicant for that ME position.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I see one other call, and I'll call on Supervisor Gabbert. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbert.
Yes, this question is for Cheryl. On page 268 under pathology services, there's an increase of 11,500 based on growing number of autopsy being performed. Just a couple of questions here. Are a lot of the number of autopsies being performed due to COVID-19 designation deaths? Are they more so for opioid overdose deaths? And are they the increase as to where we are getting the autopsies done? So I guess that's a 3-part question, but what is causing that increase?
It's not an increase to determine if a death is COVID death. There is not a pathologist in the state that will perform an autopsy just to determine whether somebody is COVID positive. They're kind of hands off there, not unless there's something suspicious or if there's trauma.
Okay.
But the large increase is going to be that our opioid deaths have tripled, and they're illicit drugs that are being found or suspected. We can do toxicology ourselves if it's more of the line of a prescription type overdose. But we have been using Fond du Lac. Like I said, we've had a rise in homicides. We've had a rise in some of our suspicious deaths where we're not exactly sure what we're looking at. So that has had the greatest impact there. Like I said, our overdoses have almost tripled. So,
do you have an average cost for an autopsy?
Average cost. Yep, our average cost for an autopsy in Fond du Lac would be $1,400.
Okay.
But there's an additional cost, usually somewhere between $300 and $600 for the use of NMS labs, which they have much more extensive testing to be able to do your synthetic, drugs over and above what the state can do. So that can be in addition to the cost. Additionally, with say a gunshot, homicide, you also have that cost of the x-rays being completed, and that adds an additional on there. But majority of this has been from the illicit, overdose deaths that we've had.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbert. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the coroner's budget. Thank you very much, Coroner Bremer, for being here and answering all the questions. Appreciate it very much. So move on down to the next budget, which is emergency management.
Their chart of staffing is on page 281. They're going to have 2 full-time and 1 part-time employee, the same as last year. Their levies increasing $6,784. That's a 3.28% increase. And I believe Linda Coleman's probably on the call.
We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the emergency management budget. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd make reference to page 278 for the accomplishments of the Emergency Management Department. And with the privilege of having serving on the Emergency Management Department, I think there should be a additional accomplish added to this, and that is the accomplishment for the COVID-19 activities in 2020. From work on the committee, it was apparent that our emergency management and staff worked diligently in providing supplies to the various hospitals and clinics at the onset of this COVID emergency. And I leave it to the director, who we have been informed is going to ride into the sunset in retirement before too long. I'll let her have her last hurrah to the budget.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Director Coleman, any comments on what Supervisor Eisen said, as well as just your departmental budget in general?
Sure. Paul, thank you for those words. It is actually listed as an accomplishment number 19 on page 279. We did actively participate in the COVID response. It's a new type of disaster for us, and we were heavily involved in getting PPE for hospitals, long-term care facilities, and doctors' offices, et cetera, and including first responders. We became a shipping and receiving type business there, and still are in some ways. So yes, it was something new for us, and it was quite busy.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question on the military command post. I see that there's been training implemented using the new unit. Has it been used for anything? And if there's been, is that something that's I guess has that been used for anything yet, as of yet?
Yeah, unfortunately, it has. There was a SWAT situation where the command post was used. It was the first time it was an active situation, and all reports are that it worked out great. The improvements to the communications equipment, the setup, everything went great. Also, we have been training on it. Eric Rasmussen, Deputy Director, has been in charge of training some staff members. We are going to be broadening that out to the other volunteer agencies after the first of the year. But also our SWAT negotiators have used it for a real live incident and also for training. So far it's worked out great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And just to refresh my memory here, what's the estimated lifespan of that military command post?
I would say at minimum 20 years. It is much better built now and back to than what we had. So I'm sure 20 years, if not longer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. I'll next call on Supervisor Conrad. Please go ahead, Supervisor Conrad. And if you could go ahead and
I got it.
Your mic is open.
Thank you. I just wanted a point of clarification on Supervisor Defferting's comment. I believe he was referring to the mobile command post, not a military command post. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Conrad.
My apologies, you're right.
Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the emergency management budget. Thank you very much, Director Coleman, for being here and certainly for all your efforts in regards to emergency management over the years. Thanks again for all you've done. So we'll move on to the next budget, which is the airport budget.
The chart of staffing for airport is on page 293. It will have 9 full-time employees, the same as last year's budget. And
Mamma mia.
that page also shows the increase in the levy for the airport. And Jim Shell should be online for any questions.
We'll open it up for any questions or thoughts in regards to the airport budget. Any questions in regards to the airport departmental budget? I'll call on Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Good morning, Jim. Just wondering, do we have enough money in the marketing budget to market that new industrial park we have? I mean, I know the taxiway now is basically being completed. And do we need more money to get that out there so that we can get some development in there? What is keeping that from happening? What can we as a county board do to help you?
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. We actually do have a bit of a reduction to our marketing budget from 2020 to 2021. It's a fairly small reduction, but we're at $25,000 in our promotions and marketing budget. This year, in 2020, we've actually underspent quite considerably in our promotions budget just due to the COVID impact. There's not a lot of folks out there that are really looking at expanding or moving or relocating at the moment. But looking long term, we're expecting to roll over or going to request a carryover of the unused marketing funds for 2020 into supplement our 2021 marketing push. In 2020, of course, a lot of in-person conventions and different places where we could create new prospects for the business park in particular were canceled. A lot of those have gone, some of them to virtual events, but those are very limited on the ability to actually network at those. And so we're hopeful that we'll have a number of possibilities in 2021 to actually get out in person and get back to those events. Of course, our venture would be one of them, one of our huge events that we typically meet with 40 to 50 companies each year as far as marketing and developing potential prospects for the business park. So 2020 is a bit of a step back, I think, for a lot of reasons. And we've tried to be very judicious with our marketing spending. In 2020, it's been fairly minimal. However, we're looking towards 2021 and we're kind of rounding the corner on the pandemic to start really pushing the business park again.
So you feel that it's adequate then for 2021, or would you want somebody to add something to that? I guess
certainly we have a fairly substantial balance in our marketing budget right now. We've spent less than $10,000 of the $30,000 that was budgeted. So rolling that over with what we've got budgeted for 2021, and that'll be our request as a budget carryover early part of next year. For those reasons, I think we have adequate funding as far as marketing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
According to the budget statement of the director, we're budgeting on a very optimistic outlook that COVID-19 will not impair EAA program. But mind you, EAA is only 8 months away. And the fact of the matter is, probably if it was a normal year, all the hotels would probably be filled with no vacancies for that time. And we'd probably have maybe half of the trailer unit spaces rented or reserved. My question is, how much money will be impacted if we lose EAA or we don't have the Air Adventure this year, and how much expenses would be offset against that? Because this is going to put perhaps a gaping hole in the budget if we're counting on big revenues from there. Could you give us a picture?
Sure. So thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Appreciate the question. Very valid question, of course, going into 2021. We are about 9 months out now from AirVenture of next year. And I think, as the sheriff mentioned earlier, I think outdoor events, which EA or AirVenture is primarily an outdoor event, are going to become more popular in 2021, just because of the ability to social distance and the open air nature of them. Also, EAA as an organization is full steam ahead in planning for 2021. And that includes quite a bit of things with COVID in mind that they didn't have the time or the ability to plan for last year, because they had to make their decision about the May timeframe of 2020 in order to plan to not have the event or have the event for this year. So with all that in mind, we are quite confident that AirVenture will happen next year, and we're budgeting accordingly. I can talk to the impacts on our revenue side that we felt the decrease from not having the event this year. It's approximately $120,000 altogether, as far as just direct reductions in revenue from not having AirVenture this year for the airport. And so, while that is a substantial sum as far as a revenue reduction because of not having the convention, this year we're able to balance our budget through some underspending, for one, in a personnel category that we just held off on filling a position most of the year. And then the other was we received some supplemental grant funding through the CARES Act to help balance our operating expenses for 2020. So we're able to keep a balanced budget without needing any additional funding in 2020. However, if for some reason 2021 AirVenture is not to happen, I think we'll have ample ability to react to that, in the fair amount of time as we did this year, and adjust accordingly. So I'm optimistic that 2021 will happen, but hopefully that gives you a clear picture of kind of what the financial impact is for the airport.
Well, thank you very much. That's a real clear picture to me. And could you give us an update on the new terminal project?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the new terminal is now coming out of the ground with footings and foundation walls having been poured and completed. We're actually going vertical now on masonry walls, and scheduled for middle of next week, we'd be starting to erect structural steel on site. So it's starting to really take shape, starting to really begin to look like a building. And we're excited to go into 2021 and have it completed on schedule as we are right now for June of next
year. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other call-ins, Director Schell, any other comments in regards to the budget before we wrap up your budget?
No, not at this time. I just appreciate the board's time, and looking forward to a successful year next year.
Very good. Thank you, Director Schell. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the airport budget. Thanks again, Director Schell. We'll move on then to the next budget, which is highway and county road maintenance. Executive Harris?
That's on page 310. But before I get into that, I just want to comment. There's a lot of events that impact airport, parks, and also the Sheriff's Department, where Sheriff's Department's often providing security for those events. Most of those events we provide because of the economic benefit to the community. And so while some of them have revenues in excessive expenses, taken as a whole, their impact on our budget when you net the expenses that we don't have against the revenues that we lose, the economic impact is not nearly as significant as you might expect. And this is particularly true on events that are held on the parks grounds. We do those as a benefit for economic economic activity in the community. We don't make large profits on the events that we host for other organizations, so that the net loss to us, again, is smaller than one would expect. Getting back to highway, on page 310 is the chart of staffing for the highway department. The highway department has two budgets. One is the highway budget that is dominated by work that we do for the state and that we're reimbursed by the state. There's also a county road maintenance, which is where we apply the levy for working on our own county roads. That department is budgeted for 85 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. That's the same as last year. And basically there's a 0 increase in levy for the county road maintenance. And Ray Polonen should be online to answer any questions you have.
We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the highway and county road maintenance. I see one call in, Supervisor Bender.
Good morning. 3 years ago, I know we put $50,000 in for parking lot maintenance. And the first year you seal coated like the Bygosh building and human services and did a little striping and crack filling. But the last 2 years, I have actually seen nothing really being done. And the sheriff's department, where the employees park, you can't even see a line on the parking lot. We don't have a good parking lot in the whole parking system. You know, I don't know when we're going to get at some seal coating, because you haven't done that in 2 years. And striping is, you actually paved the dog park for us, but it still isn't striped. And that's like 2.5 months ago. I guess I don't understand where that money is going and why it's not being used.
Commissioner Polonen?
We use the parking lot maintenance, as you know, to do repairs, not only striping and seal coating, but we have a lot of parking lots that are deteriorating that we're doing patching. We've been doing some work at the boat landings. So it includes all the parking lots, you know, in the county. In fact, we're going to be doing some work this week. We're planning to start tomorrow over at the Coughlin Center doing base repairs and pavement patching, which uses a lot of that funding. Once you start using asphalt materials, it's very expensive, and it doesn't take long to go through that budget. So we've got some repair work that we're going to be doing at the Coughlin Center, and then also at the boat landing on State Highway 47 on Lake Winnebago. We're doing some paver patching there as well. Next year, the plan is to get back at the paint line parking stall striping and also some more seal coating in the county. But we want to make the repairs to the parking lots before we spend the money on the seal coating, because essentially we want to make sure the pavement is in sufficient condition that it'll, you know, be money that's you know, appropriately spent in those locations.
Right. I don't know if you have any money left in there, but if you go by the sheriff's department where the employees park, you can't see a line on the parking lot. It's
right.
Like
and
that.
there's several, yes, there's several parking lots like that.
I just think if we could do those before fall, I mean, it's like, how are they supposed to, you know, maximize? We had to build an extra parking lot for them because they didn't have enough parking stalls. And then when you don't have lines in there, some of them are taking up a stall and a half. So we're defeating the purpose. We built an extra parking lot because they didn't have enough space. And now you can't even see the lines on the parking lot where they park. So if you have any money in there, I think it would be a good idea to get that striped before winter so that we can maximize the use, as they are running short on parking spots at most times.
Right, and that's a great point, Supervisor Bender. I think we'll have some warmer days coming where we can accomplish some of those things, and we'll also have some painting that we need to do at the Coughlin Center, you know, for this year. But as I said, there's a lot to do, so we'll keep plugging away at it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Defferding. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray, could you give us an update on the sex offender tenant placement impact upon the highway employees? Anything, any observations or comments or reactions of our folks that drive past there every day?
Well, it's my understanding there is an individual living in the trailer now. And as you know, the trailer is located at the end of our driveway on County Highway Y. The employees, you know, obviously the office staff is not very happy about having the individual out there, nor are the field staff. But, you know, as of right now, we really don't see him. We really don't know that he's there unless there's lights on. It's my understanding he's not allowed to leave the facility unless he's being escorted by a state escort. So I guess at this point, there really hasn't been any direct impact on us other than the knowledge that he's there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Gabbard. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question in regards to those parking lots. I know oftentimes it seems to be the default answer is pavement and asphalt and patchwork. You know, my issue or my concern with that is that it creates impervious surfaces, which then can contribute to stormwater issues. And so then, you know, you create a large impervious surface, and then you have to dig a ditch in order to accompany that to make sure that there's proper stormwater drainage. Have we looked into pervious options for parking lots? Is that something that's even on the table for 2021? Is there any potential cost savings that we could have for the county if we did that? And that way we could also solve another problem in regards to stormwater drainage by creating another impervious surface.
I think those types of applications would be better applied toward capital improvement projects where you're starting with a new project that you can incorporate those applications in the design when the project is being designed. Converting existing parking lots to those types of applications is a lot more difficult and would still require design work to be done. Not saying that it couldn't be done, but it'd be much more expensive. And with our limited funds, we're having, you know, we're struggling keeping up with the needs as it is with our existing pavement.
Okay. Do you think that maybe perhaps sometime in 2021 we could at least take a look at those options and just kind of, you know, at least so then we have it out on the table and say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost for us. And then also look at the long-term savings too in regards to maintenance and so forth. I just think that it just seems to be something that's overlooked, and it would be nice that for us to actually kind of, you know, just at least take a look at it and see if it might be worth our while and maybe save the county some money too in the end.
We can certainly take a look at, you know, what options are available that might make sense. Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Okay, Ray, I have a question regarding the towns, especially the town that I reside in. There's been some rumblings that all of the work that was scheduled didn't get done this year for our township. And I just wanted to hear your take on it and not necessarily blame it all on COVID-19, but can you give me kind of an update what happened there that the work wasn't done? And I know we're at the bottom of the pile for road work, but I know that you helped us out on a couple major funding things like Vinland Road, and I really appreciate that. So we did get some funding for that, but unfortunately we didn't get the work done this year because of Wisconsin Public Service not getting their work done. But my main question to you is, how is it going with the towns and getting their work done for them?
Well, this year we made an effort to focus on the townships. At the beginning of the year, we wanted to get as much town work done as we could early in the year, because that was a concern that was expressed to me last year as well. So I wanted to make a change in our operations to focus on the townships, to provide services for them, and to try to complete their needs, which we did. I will say that we have completed most of the work that we're aware of with the townships. There's very little that hasn't been completed, some minor things that haven't been completed yet, some ditching projects here and there, but for the overall, you know, the most part, the town work has been completed or will be before we have, you know, before the end of the year. So I would say overall, that's really something that we've made a focus to try to, you know, accommodate the township's needs, and that's very important to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbert. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray, I was kind of focusing on your comment about not being able to keep up with the repair needs and limited budget for those purposes. Do you have and has your committee looked at the scope of the issue, you know, where we have absolutely needed repair, but not enough time or money to deal with everything?
We haven't looked at it specifically, and I think a lot of it is perception. You know, what one person might think is something that's a dire need may or may not be based on, you know, maintenance needs or, you know, an engineering approach to what the needs may be. So when I look at our parking lots, we have a table or a spreadsheet that we put together that prioritizes all of our parking lots in the county.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to keep up with our prioritized work. It just, you know, some people may think that it needs to happen faster than what's really practical, I guess, in my opinion, as a highway commissioner.
Okay. Yeah, I would just encourage you that if we're not keeping up and you determine that there are things that should be done that we are not doing, that's something that we should be addressing. Infrastructure is very important, and your area, a really big part of that. So I would encourage you and your committee, you know, if there's an issue there, that be put on the table with some information, and so we can make a decision about it.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I know I worked for the highway department for 24 years, and I actually, for several years, did the phaser system there, evaluating the roads. At that time, we didn't evaluate the parking lots. But I can tell you there's 2 parking lots in the parks that I was trying to get paved next year in 2021. But Ray said that he doesn't have time to do them. They were scheduled for 2023. They're going to push Parkview back to 2023 and put the parks at 2022. Those parking lots are 20% grass. That means that the asphalt has completely disintegrated, and you have basically nothing but grass. There's 80% of that parking lot, you know, you could still salvage it with some big paver patches, but if we continue to let our parking lots go, I mean, and you can just, when you walk into a meeting, look at the parking lot that you're walking on. The Coughlin Center's in poor shape. There's not a good parking lot in the whole county park. There's a couple of them I believe that could be salvaged with a little bit of work, seal coating and restriping and crack filling. There's 4 of them, you know, 2 of them have never been paved. That for 10 years, they've been in gravel waiting to be paved. You know, we have money. We're going to have $8 to $10 million less under budget this year, but yet we don't ever want to take that money and invest it in our parking lots or our infrastructure. You know, and I can understand that, you know, these are uncertain times, and we are very close to getting the AAA bond rating if we can get a little more money in reserves. But when you look at those parking lots in County Park, they're basically in desperate need of repair. And Ray said he doesn't have no time to do them in 2021. His schedule is booked up. So even if we have the money, he can't fit them in his schedule. So either we need to basically maybe put some work out for bids to get caught up so that the highway department can keep our infrastructure in good shape, or we'll just have to be satisfied with basically 80% blacktop and 25% grass parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender.
If I could add something.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Bender is correct. You know, those parking lots the existing parking lots are in poor condition, and he is right. There is grass growing in between in the cracks. A lot of that is a result of low use. If you look at the volume of traffic that uses, other than the dog park parking area, the amount of traffic that uses those parking lots, it's not as much as the other, you know, parking lots that we have in the county, such as the courthouse or the Coughlin Center or other, you know, Parkview. So we look at the need based on how much it's being used, people. And if you look at the parks, they're also, the park is closed in the winter. They're not used at all for a large portion of the year. So he is right, they are in need. It just becomes a prioritization process for me as to where the needs are versus what the conditions are. And we are going to get the work done in 2022. I have all the parking lots in the park system scheduled for repaving. So we'll get them all done in 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Polonen. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht. Please go ahead, Supervisor Albrecht. And if you could.
I'd like to compliment you on the job you do, seeing that the highways and the roads are clear for people to go to work. I think you do a tremendous job in that part.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you.
Seeing no other call-ins, Highway Commissioner Polonen, anything further to add before we conclude your departmental budget?
We're looking forward to 2021. We're hoping that COVID-19 comes under control so that we can move forward without any restrictions. We're hopeful for that. We have a very busy year coming up, planned for 2021 on the state highway system, the county highway system, and also the townships. So we're going to be very, very busy, and it's good to have that work there for us and for our employees. And who knows what will happen over the winter? If you believe in the Farmer's Almanac, they're saying that we're going to have a hard winter this year, but I'm hoping that we don't. So we'll see how it goes. But again, looking forward to 2021.
Very good. Thank you very much, Highway Commissioner Polonen.
Thank
you.
That
will conclude the Highway and County Road Maintenance budget review. So we'll move to the next one, which is Public Health.
The chart of staffing for public health is on page 335. And there's 42 full-time employees and 9 part-time employees. That's an increase of 4 full-time employees, although the notes below explain that some of those increases occurred during the year, not just as part of this budget. Although this budget does add a full-time epidemiologist. And I should also point out that contact tracers are not included in those totals. Contact tracers are project employees, and we've hired several, but they're not within those totals. And Doug Gearin probably is online to answer any questions you have.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions on the Public Health departmental budget. I'll call on Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug, how close are we feeling the WIC program manager? And I think we also had one other supervisor position that was open. How close are we to filling those?
Director Gearin?
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. Yes, for the WIC position, we are currently in the midst of exploring a consolidation with Outagamie County. And so at this point in time, while we're working through that, we have an interim WIC director that is one of the existing WIC staff. And we are working in partnership with Outagamie and the state of Wisconsin. We anticipate that we would have an agreement in place and are planning a budget for 2021 at this point in time. So what would have to happen is we would have a budget amendment at some point if that, or excuse me, a budget transfer if that succeeds. It looks like it will, and I've shared this information with our Board of Health and with County Executive. And so we don't expect right now that we're going to refill that position. And Supervisor Norton, what was the other position you were asking about?
I thought we also had a supervisor position that we were open yet. Is that still open?
So we just filled the administrative division supervisor position. That was an internal promotion and has resulted in another vacancy that we'll be posting sometime hopefully in the next week or so.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to point out on page 339 in respect to public health that the issue of wage and fringe turnover savings, objects 51,150 and 51,250 total $100,000, $71,675 for wages and $28,325 for fringes. If there is any other sentiment in the board to consider the point of budget consideration of staffing and budgeting for these positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Gabbert, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbert.
Yes, I have a quick question for you, Doug, and this is just not political, nothing at all with that, but I need a clarification from you. Great director of the Public Health Department, but can you clarify why you are designated as a health officer?
Supervisor Gabbert, yes. So the state statutes put in place the mechanism for establishment of a local health officer. And
Yes.
in most organizations or most public health departments, at least standalone ones, the director usually serves as the role as health officer. In some combined agencies such as human services and public health agencies, the director of the human services, health and human services department may not also be the health officer. The lead for the public health division would be that health officer. The health officer requirement that's outlined does require an approval from the State Department of Public Health. And so any persons that are put into position of a health officer must be approved by the state in addition to any approval process that's at the county level.
Well, the reason I'm asking this question is I read the state statute 25106, which tells the clarifications for class 1, 2, and 3 health departments and what the qualifications are. And there's where the question is coming up to me. So did someone appoint you to this position at the state, or how did that go down? And I understand we're a class 3 health department. Is that correct?
Yes, we are what's called a level 3 by DHS 140. So what happens is when I interviewed for the position and was selected by the former county executive for this role, that had to be first approved by the county board at that time and also by the State Department of Health for ensuring that I met the qualifications and experience level for being a health officer.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbert. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug, I probably should have called you with this question, but it just came into my mind again the other day, and it is somewhat budget related. In the past, the county supported the Living Healthy Community Clinic with an annual grant. And then we dissolved that Living Healthy Clinic to bring partnership into our community to deal with our low income, uninsured, and underinsured people. And now we have a new clinic being started. And I just wanted to get your take on basically where we are in addressing the uninsured and underinsured in the community, and why we have this newer clinic coming into being if partnership is supposed to be covering everything.
Mhm. So the new clinic starting was a bit of a surprise to me. We
Okay.
typically like to be
Yeah.
involved in those conversations and assist the community that way. Funding for these clinics actually runs through the Human Services Department and not the Public Health
Okay.
Department.
Okay.
So the allocations that went to Living Healthy, while
Right.
we were
Right.
certainly a proponent of that, they actually ran through the Human Services budget.
Right.
And what I'll be doing is reaching out to this new clinic, just like when the Hope Clinic opened up, in the Menasha area, Menasha-Appleton area. We'll certainly reach out to them and try to get a better understanding of what their services are, how we can support them, and how they, best fit into the community, and that we can hopefully integrate what they have to offer to maximize that benefit in the community.
So from your perspective, is this a reaction to, we were very concerned at the time we closed Living Healthy that there would be people who would fall through the cracks that Living Healthy was serving at the time. And so am I to imply that partnership is not covering that uninsured group? Or do you have any sense of that, or should I ask that of Dr. Topol?
So, I mean, if you feel free to ask Dr. Topol, partnership, does offer medical clinic services in Oshkosh. They were suspended for a period of time, and I'd have to check on the current status of those, but I believe they're seeing patients again. Father Carr has also has a facility where they've been seeing patients. So, and partnership, sees insured and uninsured persons. So, if people have the ability to get to Father Carr, to partnership, they can receive services there.
Yeah, I think as I recall, our concern at the time is they were limiting the uninsured, so they could keep their numbers in line and their budgets. So anyway, okay, I will ask Dr. Topol about that as well. But I thank you. I'm very interested in what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Seeing no other calls before we wrap up the budget, Director Gearin, anything else in regards to your departmental budget?
I did want to echo a couple of the comments that Executive Harris had, in that you don't see the funds currently in this budget for our COVID response. All of the funds that have come in for our COVID response were done, by budget transfer during the year this year and expire largely at the end of this year. We are aware of some funding sources that will continue into next year, and we will likely have budget transfers either later this year or early next year to cover that. Just to give you a sense of the volume of that, we are probably spending around $150,000 a month on our COVID response right now. We have over 30 contact tracers that have been hired on a temporary or project basis. That represents about 20 FTE worth of work, in addition to about another 10 FTE of staff internally, and then many other staff repurposed for other parts of the COVID response. We are largely a COVID response agency right now, and have really limited our ability to respond or to do other traditional public health work. We do hope that burden will lift next year, although right now it appears that we're going to be in a pretty difficult situation for quite some time to come, especially if we don't have any statewide orders or any local orders that help supplement any voluntary compliance with physical distancing, occupancy, masking, that sort of thing. The budget transfers that we've had this year included about $1.3 million in contact tracing, which I anticipate will expend all of, and then a few $100,000 in other funds to help us out with testing and planning. I do anticipate that because we've diverted so much of our routine work to the COVID response, we've expended mostly federal funds for those staff and instead of levy funds, and that we will likely return, $750,000 or more to our reserve at the end of this year, just from expending primarily federal grant funds for many of those positions that are responding to COVID.
Thank you, Director Gearin. Very good. We'll wrap up and conclude the Public Health Departmental Budget Review. So we'll move on to the next one. Thanks again, Director Gearin, for your time and for being here and answering the questions.
Thank you.
So next departmental budget is child support. Executive Harris.
Child support's chart of employees is on page 347. They will have 26 full-time employees for 2021, the same as last year. Their tax levy is increasing $16,968 or 5.73%. And Julie Mabry should be online to answer any questions you have.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the child support departmental budget. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to point out that on page 351, child support, there is reference to the fringe turnover savings of object 51250 in the amount of $14,000. I don't know where that's going to be coming from or what that applies to, but that's what the budget says.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Any other comments or questions in regards to the child support budget?
I can answer Supervisor Eisen's question if you'd like me to, Mr. Chairman.
Please go right ahead.
Supervisor Eisen, that deduction for fringe benefits was made because there were, due to turnover, several vacancies at the time the budget was prepared. Those have since been filled, I believe. The deduction was made because we normally budget for family health insurance, but statistically, only about half of the new employees in that department take family health insurance. So we budgeted for at least one of the employees not to take family health insurance, and that shows up in that deduction from the fringe benefit column.
Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation, Director Cowden. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Any other comments or questions regarding child support? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and conclude that report. Thank you also to Julie Mabry. I did see she was on the call, so certainly thank you for being here and being available to answer any questions. So we'll move on to the next budget. Thank you. Next budget is the Veteran Services budget. I'll call on Executive Harris.
Their chart of staffing is on page 358. They're budgeted for 8 full-time employees, the same as last year. And their levy has actually got a decrease of $23,547 or a 3.42% decrease. And their chart of significant changes is on page 359.
We'll open it up for any questions or comments in regards to the Veteran Services budget. Seeing none, we'll conclude the Veteran Services budget and move on to the next budget, Human Services.
Human Services is one of our largest departments. Their chart of staffing is on page 379. They are budgeted for 2021 for 269 full-time employees and 24 part-time employees. That's an increase of 6 full-time employees from 2020. And I believe Bill Topol should be online to answer any questions you have.
We'll open it up for questions and comments in regards to Human Services. I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. At the 2020 budget session, as documented by the budget session streaming video part 3, I raised a concern that for 9 years, our adopted levy for human services exceeded the documented actual levy expended by over $1 million annually. This went back to 2010. And you have to look, the budget actual amount is 2 years delayed from the time that the money is budgeted. So you have to go back and check 2 years subsequent to see what it actually turns out to be. Without going into the details of this, because if you really wanted to know, you could go back and spend the time looking at the video. But my question today to Dr. Topol is, what has Human Services Department done to address these discrepancies? I was very pleased with your explanation last year, but I think that this is an ongoing issue that needs the board's attention. And whether or not anything is done about it, I think that the new supervisors that are on the board, as well as refreshing the memories of the existing supervisors, should know that, you know, we're levying millions of dollars more than what the department ends up using.
Director Topol, if you could please answer his question. I see he's on the call. We're just working to unmute his mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, great, thank you. And thanks for the question, Mr. Eisen. And I first want to say, by way of explanation of the Human Services Department, that there's a couple of things, especially for new supervisors, that probably is confusing about the Department of Human Services. The Department of Human Services is funded about 40% by county tax levy, and the remaining 60% comes from federal, state, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, and client fees. So the marching orders we have in human services come from federal and state contracts and laws that we have to follow in order to provide that service. So it's not strictly a Winnebago County originated service. And the reason I say that is the other thing that's unusual about human services is that we're a managed care process, meaning that we don't have a choice to deny services to people who come to us that are Winnebago County residents that need a service that's we assess and evaluate, and if that need exists, we are responsible for providing whatever array of services are necessary to resolve their child, adult, or family issue. We have 5 departments really inside of human services: behavioral health, child welfare, kids long-term support services, economic support, and admin. People confuse human services with being a welfare agency, meaning that the assumption is that people come to human services, they ask for a benefit, they're evaluated for that benefit, and if they're found eligible, they receive that benefit, and that it's somehow just a transaction between the county resident and one of my staff. That only exists in about 20% of the work that we do. The remaining 80% is based more like a health plan that Mike Pollard described to you as what we do for self-insurance in the county, we basically are attempting to analyze for next year how many people are going to show up at our door, how many kids are going to need services that may involve upwards of a several $100,000 a year placement. We have adults that come to our door for mental health services. They may need something as simple as a counseling session to something as complex as hospitalization for weeks or months. That again falls on Winnebago County. So in terms of estimating the numbers of people we're going to serve, the types of service we're going to provide, how much is that going to cost, it is probably one of the largest professional guesses that you can make in county government in terms of what you're going to need to provide. The funding being 40% county tax levy and 60% other sources are there because there's a recognition that the county shouldn't have to bear the total consequence of all of those needs having to be provided throughout the year. What we try to do in Human Services since I've been here is try to provide local service as much as we can through our department or with local service providers that we have arrangements with. We try to provide services that way and try to avoid using out-of-county, high-end institutional placements. That was sort of the strategy that you allowed me to have a new staff with in 2008 when I first started my first year. And the promise that I made was that by changing to a community-based service program, that we would likely save money as we wouldn't be sending our kids, our adults, to out-of-county providers that we really didn't have much control over or much say over, and that we just had to pay the bill for. So that's been the strategy. The strategy has been that way for many years. Now, the specific question of Mr. Eisens is the surpluses have been there for 10 years. I recognize that they have been. Some of that surplus has to do with things that are out of our control, meaning, for instance, and something that Mr. Eisens brought up already in this budget process is what to do about unexpended salary and fringe when we have people leaving and it takes 2 to 3 months to hire new people. You know, we have excess surplus because of unexpended labor and fringe. We also have somewhere between $1 million to $1.5 million that is not able to be budgeted every year, that has to show up as surplus because auditors don't allow us to put anticipated, we have an anticipation that we're going to get some revenue from 2 years ago, possibly 3 years ago, but because it is in the form of a claim to the state that goes to the feds have to approve the claim, the claim comes back to the state decides how much it's going to keep for its share and then gives us the remainder. We get an amount of money this time of year, and again, it can be around $1 million, or it can be a little larger, a little smaller, but it's not something that the state will identify for us at the beginning of the year what it is that we're likely to receive at this time of year. The auditors have told us that they don't want us to budget that money because it cannot be specifically determined what the amount will be. That's been the direction from the auditors. So those two pots of money together represent probably $1 million, $1.5 million that we really don't have any opportunity to address. The other remaining part of surpluses happened because we didn't have to spend money on expensive placements that we needed to put in the budget because if they happen, and I'll use an example, Lincoln Hills Correctional Institution, which many of you have heard about, have had a lot of problems in recent years. If a child commits a crime that is a serious crime, Sometimes judges order them to go to Copper Lake or Lincoln Hills Correctional Institution for a year. We don't control that decision. That's a judge's decision, but Winnebago County pays for that entire stay. And that stay now is close to $200,000 a year. So we have to budget for at least what we think may happen for next year. So in our case, we budgeted for one person going to corrections. We can certainly take that out. The last 3 years, we haven't had to put someone there, but that's an example of we budgeted for it because we thought that it was necessary and we didn't need to use it. Therefore, it becomes a surplus. So you combine that by hundreds of people that we are trying to address their needs throughout the year, and either you can have a large surplus, you could have a small surplus, you could have a small deficit, you could have a large deficit. It doesn't mean that management is not attempting to control those costs as they come up. We try to address them by having monthly reviews of these things. And so in total, we've had surpluses. I look at that as being a good steward of county taxpayer funding, of federal and state funding. You may see that as unnecessary. I would caution that if you remove tax levy, then the danger is that because we have tax levy limits, that we may not be able to put tax levy back in future budgets when we're going to need to pay for these things. So the last thing that Mr. Eisen asked was, what is the plan? So I met with County Executive Harris in January of this year. We discussed a plan to reduce the size of the levies going forward. And the plan is this, that the Human Services budget will assume that we will receive no new tax levy for next year, that we'd also receive no new tax levy for the following year and the year after that. Now, what does that mean? It means that I would take on the responsibility of finding reductions to cover increases in wages and fringes, which amounts to about $400,000 in my department, and would also find reductions or increases in revenue for provider increases, which that amounts to about $400,000 also. So this year, we essentially had to find either increased revenue or decreased expenses for $800,000 of new costs that came into our budget, even as the tax levy is the same. Now, you see the tax levy as being $123,000 more than last year, and the only reason that that is there is not because I'm asking for more tax levy, but because of the positions that you funded last year for the Connect program was taken out of the general fund for this year. And my understanding from last year is that these were 2-year project positions, which means that next year is the second year of the project, and no money was designated from the general fund for the second year of the Connect program staff. So therefore, it shows up as a county tax levy increase to my budget. I didn't ask for that, but it has to be accounted for somewhere if we're going to continue Connect into next year. So essentially, the plan is to keep the tax levy flat for the next 3 years for my department, and I will assume about $800,000 of new expenses each year, which will bring down the surplus by $2.4 million or close to that by the end of 3 years. That is the plan.
Thank you very much for that explanation to the board. And it certainly satisfies my inquiries and my concerns. But the proof of the pudding is going to be in examining the future budgets and to see how much on target we are as this unfolds. But unfortunately, we're not going to know that answer to 2023, or at least I wouldn't know it looking into the budget at this particular point in time. I'm going to defer. I have more to say, but I'm going to defer to allow or to defer to other supervisors who may care to address this issue to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I'll next call on Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Gabbard. And just for the moment, I'm going to turn over to Vice Chairperson Egan just for a quick break for myself. But Supervisor Shorsey is next, followed by Supervisor Gabbard. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard. Excuse me, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Topol, did you hear my discussion with, or my question to Doug Guerin about the clinic issue?
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you care to respond?
Sure. So the Living Healthy Clinic was a clinic in Oshkosh that we started at the county in supporting when General Relief, which was a program
Right.
probably been gone for 20 years now. It was meant as sort of a way to provide some health insurance for people who had no health insurance in Winnebago County. And so the monies that were in General Relief back in those days were given to Healthy Living to support trying to provide some medical care to uninsured individuals. So when I came on board in 2007, there was funding for that purpose. And shortly after that, the north end of the county got partnership services for uninsured individuals. And so they received a $25,000 a year contribution for uninsured individuals from Winnebago County. And they provide us, monthly statistics about their utilization. So what happened when Living Healthy decided not to operate any longer, the partnership made a commitment to open up some medical services and dental services in Oshkosh, which they did. And they also received a similar $25,000 grant to provide uninsured medical services to Winnebago County residents. And that's what exists in our budget today. So the north half of the county receives or provides, we provide $25,000 for the north end and $25,000 for the south end through the partnership.
So my underlying question was, we're seeing a new clinic being developed in Oshkosh now to serve the uninsured and underinsured, similar to Living Healthy. So my question is, are you aware of why that was done if partnership was supposed to pick up on the underinsured and uninsured?
Well, the partnership still provides those services. They had to limit them during the first part of the COVID outbreak. So as far as I know, they're still doing that. I haven't been told to the contrary. I don't know anything about the new clinic. Much like Doug said, I'm just first hearing about it today. They haven't approached the county, as far as I know, for any kind of financial assistance. If they did, we would have to evaluate what is their role. Is there an additional role that they play that partnership can't or won't? But honestly, I haven't heard that partnership is not available for people here in
and if memory serves me, I think we did at least 4,000 visits, you know, or 4,000 plus visits at Living Healthy for those people. So I know there was a great concern at the time when funding was pulled for the program, you know, that it would, that we would lose service to that population. And at the time, it created a systemic approach to dealing with the uninsured and also the whole medication subsidy assistance went away. So, or at least was supposed to be picked up by partnership. So I would encourage us, and I know COVID is, you know, the priority at the time, but I think it would be well worth our while to really take a look again at that system of care and see what's going on. So the second question I had was around addiction recovery. And I know in a conversation I had about with the Connect program, I became aware that we maybe had a waiting list for addiction recovery. And in light of, you know, overdoses and just a growing issue, can you comment on if we do indeed have waiting lists for addiction recovery and whether you've considered expanding services in that area?
Sure. I'm gonna defer to my deputy director who's on the call, Renee Sirocco. She is also right now just transitioning. She was the behavioral health division manager who was directly responsible for that programming. And I believe she can give you a much clearer answer than I can. So Renee, could you address that, please?
Thank you, Dr. Topol.
Renee might need to be unmuted. Renee may, I'll just, I'll try to get you accurate information on that. I have not heard that we have a waiting list. We have quite a lot of resources available to us for treatment. It would be surprising to me if we had a wait list, but I will definitely get back to you by the end of today. We'll send you an email if that's okay.
That would be great. And that was maybe 9 months ago. So I would suspect that, you know, if we do have one, that it's even greater now.
Renee's just come into my office and she's going to sit at my desk and tell you the answer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning. I was trying to talk, but must not have been unmuted. Anyway, yes, Bill is correct. We do not have a waiting list. Currently, if somebody contacts our office, we're making appointments within 2 weeks. Most of it is by telehealth, you know, by video, but we do see people in person. And regarding your question about expanding services, yes, we are looking to add groups and do more in-house. You know, some of you may know that historically, Winnebago has contracted out for direct outpatient. However, we are trying to reassume handling that more ourselves and then reducing referrals and then costs to external providers as well.
Great. And do we have subsidy for people who have financial need for addiction services?
Yes, as Bill was saying, we can't, you know, while we assess people, we don't turn people away who can't pay. So a lot of our folks have a zero ability, so they receive services for free.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Yep. Anything else related to the clinic?
No.
Thank you, Dr. Topol and Renee. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsky. Next is Supervisor Gabbert, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum.
Can you hear me?
Supervisor Gabbert.
Okay. This is for Dr. Topol. Just some clarification. We got the new crisis center that's open, and I see, and this is what caught my eye, you're adding a full-time crisis center specialist lead position. At the time that we had those two homes and had a max of 8 clients in each home. We were told there probably would not be any employee changes, that we could use all the employees from both when we moved into the crisis center. So I guess my question is, we didn't have a crisis center specialist when we were taking care of clients in both of the homes in Oshkosh. And now we're at the new crisis center. We need a crisis center specialist. That's a question. Then I wanted to know if you know the current number of clients that are residing in the crisis center, and what is the new maximum stay that someone stays at the crisis center?
Okay. Thanks for the question. And by way of just introducing, the Crisis Center was a project that you all approved about 3 years ago to build a freestanding 16-bed residential center for people to stay from a week to no longer than 6 months if they have a mental health crisis. And the idea there is to try to serve them in a setting that isn't a hospital, which of course is about 3 or 4 times more expensive than serving them at our facility. And the maximum, you're correct, is 16 beds. We opened on April 1st. That was, if you remember at the time, we were right in the beginning stages of COVID-19. And we were very careful about trying to understand who we could admit and who we couldn't admit based on the COVID situation. I will say that I'm disappointed only from the standpoint that COVID has really limited our ability to take some clients. We have been averaging, I would say, 5 or 6 clients. I would have liked to, by this point, be averaging somewhere around 12 to 15 clients and open it up to some other counties if they had some need that we could also provide for them. So we were looking at the configuration of staff, and we did some shuffling of staff. We didn't necessarily just say, oh, we're going to add a new crisis specialist lead and not look at the other positions. We actually, in fact, came up with a plan that was a requirement that we try to reduce the FTE count or the cost of 2 FTEs to try to reduce that by having this new facility. And what we did was we put together a plan that came up with some reductions in relief staff, which are more temporary or occasional staff. And we also increased our revenue projections because we're doing more individual and group billable services. So what you're seeing with the new position is, yes, it's a new position, but in fact, it didn't amount to the cost of to the county of bearing that. We were able to do that through increased revenues and how we can operate there and bill Medicaid and private insurances for those stays. So we needed that lead staff because we needed to have someone who was there and could schedule all of these people. That this is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 3 shifts, and manage that crew. We also made some other changes because we didn't refill a crisis manager position. We kind of created a daytime and nighttime supervisor that works better in terms of operations. So overall, there's a reduction in the cost of providing crisis services. You're seeing new staff on the TO, but it doesn't result in new tax levy.
Okay, as always, that answers my questions, but now I have another question. What happens to the people that we can't get in the crisis center if we're averaging 5 to 6? Where are those clients being taken care of, if at all?
Well, they're taken care of in a variety of ways. Some we're monitoring multiple days a week, either in person or virtually. So we can monitor them. We can have them come into the clinic. We can have them see case managers. We can have them get injections. We can have them see the doctors here. If we can manage it that way without them going to the crisis center, we do that. In other cases, some people probably are staying a little bit longer in inpatient hospital settings, just because we have to have enough staff available to be able to man the crisis center. And quite honestly, because we've had a couple of staff over the months test positive and a number of staff being quarantined because they were contact traced, we've had periods of time where we've had just a bare minimum complement of staff, and we were only able to really handle 5 or 6 people at one time. And that's the difficulty of running any kind of residential operation. Parkview has a much larger group of people to worry about, and when you have staff issues, you have to kind of limit your availability to take new clients. And that's really a sad thing for me to say. I don't like us doing that. I don't think that we would turn anybody away, that the crisis center would be the only option. So I want to assure you that if it is the only option, we will take them. They aren't going to be left out on the street and defend for themselves.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Topol, and thank you, Supervisor Gabbert. Next is Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by
Thank you,
Winnebago
Vice
County.
Chairman Egan. I agree with Supervisor Eisen on that surplus. Last year, there was supervisors complaining about children. If in the case of a crisis, there's children that would not get the things that they need. And I believe that we would still fund them if there happened to be a crisis. We would still fund them, but I think the chance is pretty slim. And as far as good stewardship, I don't think that, having this huge surplus is good stewardship of the taxpayers' money. I don't think there'd be many taxpayers that would agree with that. And I'm not really sure if I want to wait 3 years to reduce that surplus. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. And next we have Winnebago County. I'm not sure if that's Chairman Ramos or who.
That's actually me.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. A question to Dr. Topol as well. This actually goes back to the addiction recovery, and I know that there's a couple other resources, local resources in regards to addiction recovery. One of them is Helios, which is mostly involved in Outagamie County, but they are in the process of, well, not in the process, they've actually completed in training a lot more addiction recovery coaches. And I definitely think that we could probably utilize that resource and utilize local nonprofits as a way to help in regards to addiction recovery, specifically those that are involved in either drug court or those that even first-time offenders, and to divert from incarceration and from diverting from charges. And also it could be a way for us to offset a lot of county budget costs, and wanted to know if that's something that we would be looking for exploring in 2021 and looking at local nonprofits for addiction recovery and not just simply county resources.
Sure. we're always looking for other services we can provide. I think you mentioned a couple of good ones. I know that Carol Morak, who runs a number of our diversion programs in our Human Services Department in coordination with the Safe Streets Committee, the District Attorney's Office, the courts, that she brings to our attention very often what other partners we can add to the mix. We're not opposed to partnering with any and all of those folks. So if there's something that we've overlooked, if you hear that you think we're not aware of a potential partnership out there, that please let us. You mentioned Helios, you mentioned some nonprofits. I'll make sure that we are looking into that and seeing if we can partner with them in some way in our continuum of care. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Brian.
Yeah, excellent. And would it be you that I would contact if we want to start a partnership going forward, or would it be someone else?
It could be me. If you want me to use me as a point person, it could be Renee Sirocco, who was just on the call a few minutes ago, or Carol Morak, who is kind of the coordinator of a number of programs.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Topol, and thank you, Supervisor Deferding. Next is Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I do agree with Supervisor Powers in the beginning when she said that the Human Services Department is our biggest department, and coming up with the budget from year to year is very difficult. I think that Dr. Topol definitely answered Supervisor Eisen's question very well when he talked about budgeting for admissions to Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake. And then we also talked about even just budgeting for specialty hospitals such as Winnebago Mental Health Institute or Mendota Mental Health, which right now is costing the county a little over $1,000 a day to house somebody at either one of those places. So you might budget for one or two people. You might not have anybody to go there. You might budget for one and two and have 3 or 4 people go. You just never know what the cost is going to be with that. I think that Dr. Topol's plan to decrease the tax levy over the next 3 years is perfect. I mean, we need to be careful as supervisors with decreasing tax levy for some of these departments, because once you decrease it, you're never going to get it back. So I think we need to, Dr. Topol's plan for the next 3 years is good. And to kind of answer Supervisor Nussbaum's question a little bit, these carryovers that are so-called surpluses at the end of the year aren't really surpluses. They go back into the general fund. So it's not like the Human Services Department is stocking up a slush fund and we can just use that to decrease or whatever. All that money, if it's left over, all goes back to the general fund. It doesn't stay with the Human Services budget. So that's all I want to know. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Supervisor Rasmussen will be up, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Supervisor Rasmussen.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I'm trying to get on a site here. Dr. Topol, we talk a lot here about levy and crisis and things. When we were looking through the lists from the CARES Act expenditures, it piqued my interest of some of the things that were being purchased. And excuse me, I got to get on this site. I need to get on here. Bear with me a minute. I don't know. I lost what I was looking at. Anyways, some things that just have been purchased lately. And I'm doing this off of memory now because I can't find my list. But grills, mountain bikes, trampolines, memberships for wrestling, memberships for martial arts, and I guess the best one is gift certificates for Victoria's Secret. I just kind of wondering how that works, who signs off on that stuff, how is that family issues, how is that crisis? Because it seems to me like that would be taking away from true issues and true crisis that are out there that needs to be handled. Maybe you can just address how that works.
Sure. In the Department of Children and Families, going back probably 20 years ago, there was a philosophy that came into play that's called wraparound. And what child welfare leaders back in the mid-90s discovered was that families sometimes need personal support more. It's more effective in helping families change than some of our professional services. So what that means is that the Department of Children and Families have authorized us to be able to use some funding that they actually provided to us and still provide to us to try to keep families together. And so things like paying for a refrigerator repair, finding a used car, buying kids clothes, buying them a bicycle, buying, I don't understand the Victoria's Secret, I'll have to look into that one. But other than that, these are things that are assessed by the family in conjunction with my staff as integral, a part of the process of improving relationships among family members or with that person and the greater community. Sometimes you purchase memberships to the Y or to the Boys and Girls Club or whatever the case may be there. And all of those things are reviewed by first the caseworker, then with their supervisor, and then with the manager of the Child Welfare Division to make sure that it has a connection and that it fits into the larger plan. This is not in place of therapy. This is not in place of other case management services. It's an adjunct to it. And these kinds of things are allowed in child welfare practice, have been allowed for probably 20, 25 years now. And they're unusual, and I understand why people have a hard time understanding, well, what are we doing there? But it's a piece of the greater puzzle of trying to keep kids and families together. And that's the rationale. There's at least 3 levels of checks and balances before it gets approved. And what we did approve went on the COVID list if it was something that, in addition to what we would normally do, would also be something that the COVID situation actually created a greater need for in the moment. So you'll see on that list also sometimes some kids games or even video equipment sometimes is purchased if that's an adjunct to what the family needs. So to answer your question, there's 3 levels of review of that and those things that could go on the COVID kind of reimbursement list we put on there.
Okay, thank you for that. The things you mentioned, refrigerator repairs and transportation stuff, that's certainly understandable. A few of those I named off, I just still don't understand, but I just think the board needed to know that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Topol. Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Supervisor Eisen.
Not
Supervisor Eisen.
sharing Human Services, page 387, where wage turnover savings 51,150 is 122,711, and fringe turnover savings, object 51,250 is 100,000. This is adds up with all the other fringe and wage turnovers to 836,000. Well, I just like to make that to share that with the members. Thank you.
Mr. Eisen, can I address that 250,000 of unexpended salary and fringe is going into next year's budget to make it balanced. So we did look at that, and we also looked at some things last year that you asked us to look at, which we did, and made reductions. So we are using 250,000 of unexpended salary and fringe in next year's budget to deal with the extra $800,000 worth of expenses. So we are using part of it.
So you're anticipating that monies from that 250,000 would be spent on some other item that's not been identified in the budget.
No.
It's planned outside the budget.
You're misunderstanding me. I think that you're.
Well, my understanding is that the wage and the fringe turnover balances out with wages and fringes. You have $250,000 worth of wages and fringes that is offset by $250,000 in the wage and fringe turnover account. Because that's money that may or may not be paid to new hires. Now,
Yeah, what I was trying to address is the concern.
That concerns me is what happens to that $250,000. It could end up just as an additional surplus to the undesignated general fund.
Yeah, so if we have it, you're correct. So if we have another year where we have, let's say, $500,000 worth of unexpended salary and fringe at the end of 2021, we would have used 250,000 of it in our budget for next year, but the other remaining 250 would return to the general fund. Yes.
Thank you. And of course, these are costed out throughout the five divisions: behavioral, long-term support, economic support, child welfare, and and child welfare. Thank you.
That's correct.
I have returned to the call, so I just want to thank Vice Chairperson Egan for his assistance while I was away. So thank you very much, Vice Chairman Egan. And thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I'll call on Finance Director Vicki Fitzgerald.
Thank
Director
you,
Fitzgerald.
Chairman. Thank you. I just want to clarify what Supervisor Eisen's been questioning throughout the different budgets. We are reducing the labor because they are not going to make the full labor. So it automatically is part of it's already not being given to them, so it's less I have to apply of the general fund balance in order to balance the budget. So there's not this, I think we use the word savings, and that's probably misleading because it's actually reducing the labor expenses, and again, reducing what I have to apply of the general fund balance.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Fitzgerald. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the Human Services budget. Thank you as well, Director Topol, for your time and all your information and explanations. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So the next budget is the Parkview Health Center budget. Executive Harris?
The chart of employees for Parkview is on page 431, but I need to address just a couple things that came up with Human Services because there could be public watching this budget session. When we do our budget, for 15 years now, we've been subject to an operating levy limit. And in its current form, we're only allowed to increase our operating levy by the percentage of equalized value from net new construction compared to the total equalized value. So we've been operating at amounts between, 0.5% and 2%. In the current year, we're allowed to increase the total budget by 1.455%, so 1.455. One of the ways we've been able to get through budgets with those tight limitations while giving raises that are above that amount is that the human service budget has been given budget targets well below that net new construction number. And for instance, this year they're coming in at a 0.67%, so 2/3 of 1% increase in their budget. Last year they came in at a 0.77% increase in their budget. So the only way we're getting through this budget process is by having human services have an increase in levy that is significantly less than that target so that we have enough levy left over for the remaining smaller departments to give them a little bit more generous target. And then something that will undoubtedly catch the public's imagination, gift certificates to Victoria's Secrets. I actually looked into that a couple years ago because my image of Victoria's Secret was, okay, why is this something they're giving to families? What they're doing with those gift certificates, young adults and teens have a popular brand of bras that are comfortable called Pink, and that line is sold through Victoria's Secret stores. And that was an effort to give young people that didn't have appropriately fitting bras access to that. It has a lot to do with self-image, but I was concerned with the same thing. And when I followed up, I got an explanation that completely satisfied me on that. So now to get back to Parkview Health Center, they're on page 431. Parkview Health Center is also one of our very large areas of employment. They're budgeted for 217 full-time employees and 8 part-time employees for a total of 225 employees. That's an increase of 1 full-time, but a decrease in 2 part-time employees. And their summary of significant changes is on page 433 and 434. And Marlia should be online to answer any questions.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions or thoughts. So first, I will start with Supervisor Gabbert, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbert.
So Parkview Health Center is near and dear to me, and it's been spoken about quite a bit. I'm glad that Marlia's online. I thought she had left, but she can probably explain the situation about the CNAs. And if you folks that were on the board remember, we had a 30 number shortage of CNAs. We went to work and raised the incoming wage. We redefined to a hospitality position, and we took applications. And as far as I knew, we had filled a lot of those positions. At this time, the latest information I had that we have 144 residents at Parkview. We're down from 168 basically from the COVID situation. I do believe that we're about to lose one of our best directors who's chosen to go on to another profession. And between Tom Geske and Marlia, maybe they can answer all your questions about the CNA positions and how we go about getting them trained, and that they are basically a lot of young people that go through the employment process, get trained, and then they move on for some reason or other. So that was my big concern, that we get this all straightened out about what's going on that is all good out at Parkview Health Center. Thank you.
I guess I'll start. Mr. Chairman, I will start my comments. And actually, I wasn't quick enough on the draw before Vicki Fitzgerald signed off on her comments. But Vicki, would you say that the process you're using that Paul is concerned about is considered a standard accounting practice?
Yes, I've seen it in many budgets throughout the technical college system. You know, they have different ways of where they put that savings. You know, they might put it in a separate account, but overall, I've never seen them. Most of my places have taken health insurance and used like a blended rate versus a whole family rate. You know, so there's just different ways of doing that, but then that way we're over budgeted. So it is current practice elsewhere, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Ellis, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Ellis. And if you could go ahead and open up your mic, Supervisor Ellis.
Do you mute me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I just want to bring up a few things that are going on at Parkview right now. Parkview has been named a Newsweek magazine as the #1 nursing facility in the state of Wisconsin for the 2nd year in a row. Secondly, talking about the replacement for Marlia, we've interviewed 5 candidates. We had 6 candidates, but one didn't elect not to be interviewed. We're down to 3 now. Getting back to what is involved in Parkview right now, I talked to Tom Jeske yesterday. He said with the COVID now, they're deciding now to try to bring back new residents. And so they're just starting that as this week sometime. So that's what's going on at Parkview.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be remiss if I didn't bring to the board's attention that on page 437 for Parkview, their wage turnover savings is listed as $250,000 and fringe turnover savings at $150,000, which totals $400,000. That is offsetting the expenses of wages and fringes. And we still have no reasonable explanation what the money would be used for if we don't hire those extra people. But I certainly like Supervisor Bender's suggestion that we beef up our staffs because we can afford it. And so if we were to lose additional people, we wouldn't get hit so hard with the overtime and the redoing the hiring process. With that, I'll defer to whoever cares to speak.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen.
You know, Chairman, if I could,
please go ahead.
This demands a response. Again, and some people may not have heard this yesterday, we budget payroll and benefits as if every position we intended to fill is filled, and we budget it as if they took family health insurance. The reason we do that is in a smaller department, if you didn't do that, they would be beyond their budget when they hired someone if they took family health coverage. We know in larger departments, however, that some portion of those positions will go unfilled. No matter how hard we're trying to fill them, there's some turnover. We try and estimate the savings from that and put that as an entry into the budget. But that entry into the budget is a reduction in the amount of levy applied to that department. The money that Paul's worried about is money that we're not putting in those budgets. So that it's not like there's money somewhere to be spent somewhere else. Those entries are a reduction of the amount of levy applied to balance those department budgets. I just didn't want the public to hear that and think that it was somehow a pool of money sitting somewhere.
Thank you, Executive Harris. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to agree with Supervisor Gabbard and say that Marley will be very sorely missed, and the county executive is going to be pressured to replace you because the last couple directors have been very fine. But my question is, since you are leaving, Marlia, what can this board, and is this board doing enough to recruit and retrain CNAs and nurses to the facility? And what are your thoughts about what we could do more to both recruit and retrain these type of workers?
Hi, this is Tom Geske. Marlia left the facility a week and a half ago. Okay. Sorry to say. So right now we are doing as much as possible as recruiting, working with HR. So I think everything there is, you know, as we can get by, it seems to be working fine.
If I can add too, we are building a training. I just wanted to add that we are building a training facility and a combination storage and training facility on site so that we can potentially do some of our own CNA training in an effort to recruit more of them. And again, we added the, what do we call them, diplomat? We added a different category, someone who doesn't have the full CNA credentials that can do part of the CNA work. We added that category to help take workload off of them. But I think perhaps Mike Collard could address this as well.
Dr. Collard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On recruiting, certainly it's a major challenge for us, as it is for virtually every skilled nursing facility in the country. There aren't enough people who want to be CNAs in the country in order to meet the demands and the needs for them at nursing homes. So we've done a lot of things to try to improve that. First of all, on general recruiting, we've been doing pretty well. We're generally close to fully staffed with respect to nurses, for instance. We've increased the number of LPNs we have working, and we're doing pretty well on recruiting RNs, although we do see some turnover in both those categories. Most other job classes in the facility are filled. As the county executive mentioned, we did a year or two ago establish a category of employee called hospitality aides. And they don't need to have the full certification and can't do all the duties of a CNA, but they can take a lot of the burden off of CNA. We have generally been able to hire those and keep fully staffed. So we have close to 16 FTE of hospitality aides currently working at the facility. So that's made a big help. Nevertheless, boy, I wish we could do as Supervisor Bender suggests and hire a few extra CNAs. Believe me, we would if we could find them. We normally run, and it fluctuates, but we've been running something like 20 FTE short of CNAs. That's not at crisis level, but it's certainly a challenging situation for us. We have minimized our use of outside agency staff because that's extremely expensive. So we've managed to keep that quite low. Many nursing homes to survive have had to rely quite heavily on that. But we also have been able to keep a pretty good staffing ratio. One thing we have discussed, for instance, in interviews with administrator candidates, they often ask, what's your staffing ratio? How many residents per CNA and so forth? And they're often surprised that our staffing ratio is still fairly generous and beneficial to residents compared to the standard in the industry. So we've told people it's very important that we maintain those high standards and that high standard of care and a fairly high staffing ratio of nursing staff hours per patient day. So I think things have been going as well as we can. We also have been doing some other things to try to recruit. We have strong relationships with UW Oshkosh and Fox Valley Tech, which have nursing programs. We get a lot of people from there, which helps us out, but it also does contribute to the turnover because we hire a lot of students. They're generally not full-time, and they generally don't last more than a year or two because they move on, complete their degrees, move on to their careers. So we do that. We have had some training programs where we do train CNAs in-house. Even before the training center is completed, we do have the capacity to do that and have been doing it. Frankly, it hasn't been as successful as we hoped because we lose a lot of the trainees. They often don't complete the training program. We're lucky if half of them do and stay on as employees. So it's just been a major challenge, but nothing unique to us. We've been working as hard as we can to complete that and to keep as fully staffed as we can. And I do want to add my comments about the deductions in labor and benefits for unfilled staff, particularly with respect to Parkview, where it's a fairly large number. Years ago, before we started this process, when we prepared the budget for Parkview, we just leave off 20 CNAs and leave them out of the budget because we knew we wouldn't be able to hire that many. So it was a lot of guesswork. We try to be conservative. Well, we'd reduce the budget that way rather than assuming unrealistically that we'd be able to hire a full complement of CNAs. But since we started doing this, I think this is a much better procedure. We're essentially reducing the budget for these departments, but in a way that we can track as a management team much better without making ridiculous guesses about where those openings might be. At Parkview, it wasn't too hard to just leave a bunch of CNAs off the budget list, even though they were authorized and we hope to be able to hire them. But for instance, in human services, again, it's easy to say overall in human services, we have 280 employees. We're going to have, a certain number not filled at any given time. But the problem is there are over 100 different orgs, budget units in human services, and we don't know which orgs would be affected. So when you're looking at the total number, it's easy to make a deduction. And doing it this way gives us a way to reduce the budget off the top without reducing individual org budgets. If we introduce the individual org budgets, it would then produce a lot of red flags that this budget or that budget is running over without the total running over, which is really what's important. Also, as the executive mentioned, we don't use a blended rate for health insurance because if we did that, we really would run into problems in the small departments where the difference between one employee paying family insurance compared to single insurance is over $16,000. Over $14,000 and over $20,000 for one person taking no insurance compared to family insurance. So that can make a huge difference in the small department's budget. So I think it's much better from a management perspective, to budget the full rate and just make these deductions as we have been making on an increased basis every year to try to tighten up the budget and make it closer to what will actually happen.
Thank you, Director Collard. Anything further, Supervisor Norton? I'll move on to Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Yeah. Well, I think the county's lucky that we don't have any ultra-conservative Tea Party people on the board, because they would be standing on their head.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Seeing no other call-ins for the Parkview Health Center budget, we'll finish that up. I just also want to thank Tom Geske because he was on the call. I appreciate you, Tom Geske, for being available for any questions today. So thank you very much. So that will conclude then the Parkview Health Center departmental budget. We'll move on to the next one, the UWO Fox Cities campus budget.
For new board members, this needs a little explanation, but their budget starts around 451, page 451. We don't have any employees at UW Fox Cities. It's a 2-year college, and to have the state fund staffing for a 2-year college, they have to have a local government sponsor. So this is, I believe, the only 2-year college shared by 2 counties, Outagamie and Winnebago. And it's our responsibility to support the infrastructure on the campus, things like parking lots and buildings. And we've done that for years. Now they're in a closer relationship with UWO than they've been in the past, but they still have to have the local sponsors supporting the infrastructure in order for their payroll to be paid by the state. So what you see in their budget is just budgeted items related to buildings and infrastructure. And then when we do a major project, that has to go through the board approval process like any other capital project and go through the bonding process.
So we'll open it up for any questions or comments. And also, just so everyone is aware, Dr. Martin Rudd from UWO Fox Cities campus is available for any questions as well. So I see one call in. I'll call on Supervisor Schneider. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You stole my thunder. I was just going to mention that Dean Martin Rudd as well as Joanne Wright from UWO are on the call and available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Schneider. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's with great pleasure that I'm pleased to share with you that my grandson, Eli Eisen, completed his Eagle Scout project by erecting a fence at the UWO Fox Valley Community Gardens. And if you were to visit the campus, you could see this fine fence that keeps the deer away. And in the process of his construction project, I personally witnessed a deer passing by outside of the constructing area. So I'm very, very proud and pleased to share that.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I appreciate that. I'll actually take a look at that. I actually run in that area and I see where some of those deer come from. So thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Dr. Martin Rudd. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. Martin Rudd, I'm the Assistant Chancellor for the Access Campuses and the former Dean at UW Fox Valley. I've been on the campus nearly 20 years. We continue to enjoy a great relationship between Winnebago County and Outagamie County. The budget that you have in front of you, as the county executive pointed out, is our operating budget. It's our budget that's used for repairs and maintenance to the infrastructure on the campus. And Winnebago County is the fiscal agent for these expenses. What you see in front of you is 50% of the budget. Outagamie County provides the other 50%, and all invoices and expenditures run through Winnebago County as they're received. So the trustees, the Board of Trustees, which is chaired by Supervisor Tom Schneider, reviews these bills and the expenditures that are made each month, and Joanne Reif, who is the Executive Director for Facilities and Planning for UWO, also sits on the Board of Trustees, and she oversees all of the operations and facilities for all 3 campuses of UWO. So we're here if you have any questions about the operating budget that's in front of you today.
Very good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who has any questions or comments in regards to the UWO Fox Cities campus departmental budget? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and conclude that budget. Just wanted to again thank you, Dr. Martin Rudd, as well as Joanne Reif, for being available for any questions on this call today. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks again. So we'll move on then to the next budget, which is the University Extension budget. Executive Harris?
Yes, that is on page 462. They're budgeted for 4 full-time and 1 part-time employee. That's an increase of 1 part-time employee over the prior year. The tax levy for 2021 is actually a decrease of $3,231 or 0.52%.
We'll open it up for any questions or comments in regards to the University Extension departmental budget. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll conclude that budget. I do want to thank Chris Vial. I did see that he was on the call, so thank you very much for being available for any questions or comments. So that'll conclude that budget. We'll move on down to the Parks and Boat Launch Program budget.
Becky.
The chart of staffing for parks is on page 474. It's budgeted for 2021 for 9 full-time and 2 part-time employees, the same as the prior year. Their levy is increasing $7,520 or 0.57% from 2020.
We'll go ahead then to open it up for any questions or comments in regards to the Parks and Boat Launch Program departmental budget. I see one call, and I'll first call on Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I will go back to some of the discussion of from the Fair Association, and a couple questions that might be good to talk about is if there has been discussion about getting the fair to a self-sustaining event, and if they have considered or if they are ready or considered more sponsorship for their activity. I do really like this from a strategic standpoint in terms of serving the rural communities and, you know, people interested in 4-H and, you know, maybe expanding on that sort of thing. But I think it could use some attention, and I think it provides an opportunity, but it would be nice to see them moving toward self-sustaining rather than relying on a county contribution. So, and perhaps they could use some of the county contribution to hire a coordinator that would also work on the fundraising side to help it get to that position. So I don't know if anyone from Parks wants to comment on it or anyone from the committee, but those are just my thoughts.
I know Parks Director Rob Way is on the call. Director Way, if you could just go ahead and open up your mic, please. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we do interact quite a bit with the Fair Association. Certainly facilitate, make their event, help it run easier, but we don't actually take a role in trying to enhance their revenue. We have made attempts recently with the stage and so forth with our contacts to see if they could partner up with some of the entertainment industry contacts that we have. So we are trying to interject in that and try to bring in more revenue, make things easier on them. But no, we don't play a direct role in trying to ease the amount of funding they would get otherwise from the county.
Do you know if they solicit sponsorships, corporate sponsorships?
They do. Local ones, I believe they do have quite a few sponsorships locally.
And what kind of attendance do they get? Do you know?
No, I couldn't say what it was,
Okay.
especially since they didn't run this year either.
Okay, all right. So what it would be the appropriate channel for me to talk with people about their strategic direction?
So that would be UW Extension. The fair director would also be involved with that, and it does report to them.
Okay.
UW Extension Committee.
Okay, and then the fair director. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Schneider. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me adequately?
Yes, we can hear you.
Rob, you and I have had a discussion in regard to the Grumman boat launch. It is my understanding that that facility is going to be updated using, I assume, the boat launch fees that we've collected over the years. Can you give the public a bit of a summary as to what the plans are for that facility?
Certainly, I can go into where we're at in the planning process. We're just now going into a master planning phase that involves several steps, kind of an appraisal of what we have property-wise, such as wetland delineation, finding out how much property is actually usable down there. It's about 11 acres, but the primary need, as voiced by the public and by our observations, has been that it is falling more and more behind on adequate parking. There are reports of accidents and so forth that have occurred, and admittedly the parking lot is quite jammed, particularly, especially early in the season. It's one of our higher producing boat landings revenue-wise, so we're turning our attention in that direction. Also because of the improvements to County A and what is happening up the County A corridor, we anticipate in the future with residential growth that the demand on that site is only going to increase. So parking is going to be a primary need. We're also looking at the boat ramp facilities that in this master planning process, we also include a contingency if need arises for an added boat ramp at that site. Also, other activities that we're looking into might be kayaking, shoreline fishing as well. So we're just entering that early stages of the master planning process. It's going to go fairly quick, though. I think Supervisor Fari, I've mentioned to you that we're coming up with probably the first introduction of our concept design to the Parks Committee in November, and then in December we're looking to possibly have a public input meeting. We'll certainly be advertising that. So this master planning process is likely to go into the early new year before we would adopt that master plan. And if I could add one last thing, that we do anticipate making some improvements, particularly in the parking, as I mentioned. There is funding in this coming year's budget to address that, and we'll of course be seeking grant assistance with that as well.
If all this is approved, then I assume construction could be as early as this spring?
Oh, no, the grant process will hold that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I would anticipate grant approval. If we were to get a grant, that won't come any earlier than late August. At that point, we'd start applying for permits and so forth. I could picture us beginning the project in late fall if everything goes well.
Yeah, which actually might work better for the fishing season and that kind of thing.
It always does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very, very good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Schneider. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to address some of Vicky's concerns and questions. Vicky, the UW Extension Committee is the oversight, for want of a better word, for the the fair. And I see Mike is no longer, the chairman is no longer on the call, but I'm wondering if Vice Chair Egan would care to unmute and give us a little benefit of some of the former sponsorships and some of the efforts made to be a little bit more self-sustaining and why it's almost an impossible task.
Vice Chairman Egan, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Please go right ahead.
Supervisor Shorsky, they do go out and they get a lot of the trophy sponsors and other things like that. But as far as bigger sponsors, it was pretty hard, like with Country USA and all these other ones, because that's where the money will go, is where they see the bigger part of most of the people. And we did have some, I have to say, I don't want to throw any mud, but like we used to have the ATM machines. We got money back from them. Sponsor, well, the fair, or not the fair, but the Parks Committee took that over. We used to have it from Pepsi. The Parks took that over. So there's some bigger ones that we did have that we don't have any longer because of that. But the other thing is, I would say is the biggest reason is because of the bigger events. They were more or less sponsoring things like that. But they do go out and look for sponsors.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan, and thank you, Supervisor Schneider. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Supervisor Fari asked Rob about the Grunman boat landing, but I wanted to just inform the whole board that the next boat launch we are looking at upgrading is the Whittemore boat launch, which I think serves many in the town of Algoma in the central part of the county. So that's the next boat launch that we are looking to upgrade.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Any further comments or questions in regards to the Parks and Boat Launch Program departmental budget? I'll call on Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
So much of the fair too depends on the weather. You know, they don't have a lot of advanced ticket sales, and when they do have an advanced ticket sale, they'll offer it for $10, and the Midway gets 35% of all ticket sales. So right off the top, that $10 went down to $6.50. You know, and normally they get $15 for an admission. And if you're planning on going to a tractor pull and it's raining or it's bad weather, you probably aren't going to go. So much of their funding is determined by the weather. Where Country USA and Rock USA, it's all pre-tickets. They buy them ahead of time at a discount price. I mean, I don't think Outagamie County, Fond du Lac County, there's a fair around here that, you know, when I first got on UW Extension, I thought, why are we subsidizing a fair? They got to be able to make money. And for the first 2 or 3 years, I went over their budget book. They present it to us usually in December, and averages around $330,000 to $45,000 a year to put that fair on. And there is no money. I mean, the expenses are great, and it all depends on the amount of people that you have to show up. They don't charge for parking. I guess that would be one revenue source if you wanted to charge for parking. But all these people are volunteers. They get not one penny, and they meet every month on, I believe, like last Thursday was their meeting. They spend a couple hours donating their time. You know, I think it's a great organization, and if anybody can give them any input on how they could be more financial supporting for themselves, I think they would welcome it. But it's truly so much depends on the weather and the attendance. And, you know, I don't know where I looked at their budget book. I didn't see where you could cut any money. And other than charging for parking, I don't know where they'd get any more revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari. And if you could, your mic is open. Yes, if you could speak a little closer to the mic, though.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Just clarification to Supervisor Norton's comments. Were you referring to the Whittemore boat launch in the town of Winnebago? I believe you said Algoma.
Supervisor Norton?
Well, I think so. I'll defer to Rob. Where is that technically located? I would defer to Rob Way on that, but yeah.
Sure, it's more towards Omro. It's on Leonard's Point Road.
Oh,
Towards Omro.
okay. So what do you call the one in Butimore itself? The unincorporated village of Butimore. What's that boat launch called?
Yeah, I think it's the townships. I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
It is under your maintenance, so correct?
No, not that one. I know which one you're referring to, but that one isn't ours.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it's the township.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Finance Director Fitzgerald.
I just wanted to let you know that Robert Warnke's been trying to wave his hand to raise his hand instead of, with Zoom.
Certainly, I appreciate that. Supervisor Warnke, please go ahead.
I got a question about a couple of years ago, there was such a rush to tear down our stadium out there where people sit in our racetrack. And then they build a stage out there that costs an awful lot of money. And we heard about all these big bands that they're going to bring in there. I just want to know, what do you have booked for these big bands? And, you disappointed an awful lot of people by taking that racing out of there. They enjoyed that. That was part of their social life. Whatever happened to all that? I'm talking to the Parks Director.
Of course, we're probably all on the same page with regard to this past year with the cancellation of programming throughout the park system, including the Expo Center. So in addressing what we're looking at in the future as far as programming specifically at the stadium, I'll bring up opportunities are there. I think everybody knows about the recent Chapter 7 of Hypervive. We're currently investigating, what that's all about. We are trying to, we're certainly asking our contacts around the area. It is what it appears to be. No one knows very much more than, yes, it's a dissolving of Hypervive, and that may create opportunities. We're encouraged because we do have dates available for programming in the stadium. They do line up well with those dates. I can't say that we've done any marketing yet. We're not at that point of being able to get ourselves out there to be able to get anything firm. Again, I think the dust needs to clear with Hypervive. Everybody would wait and see what's going to happen with that, if there any chance of the organization being bought out or otherwise. So we're going to stay tuned to that. We do have an event, Saburo, Mexico, that we do have programmed in there in late August. It's something new. It's an ethnic festival. We're looking forward to that, working with the promoter. You'll hear more about that, hopefully this summer. Things change and we can go ahead and do that. With it being an outdoor event, I think it's a good possibility. But again, we have strong leads that may develop with this Hypervive situation. So we are pursuing that quite actively.
Okay, well, it seems like I've been hearing that same old song since you've done it, but I guess I'll wait and see what kind of big bands you're going to get out there, and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. And seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude the Parks and Boat Launch Program departmental budget. Thank you very much, Director Way, for being available for questions and comments. So thanks again.
You bet.
So we'll move on to the next departmental budget. That's the Register of Deeds. I'll call on the Executive Harris.
The Register of Deeds employment chart is on page 498. They're budgeted for 7 full-time employees, the same as last year. Register of Deeds department is a profit center. They actually generate a profit for the county that helps us in other departments. And they're budgeted for a $464,952 revenue which is a 15.52% increase over the prior year. Their chart of significant changes is on page 499. And I believe Natalie Strohmeyer should be on the line.
Very good. So we'll open it up for questions. I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, I have a point of personal privilege. I would like to ask if we could have a recess so we could either have a comfort break or else a lunch break.
So we certainly can. Are you making a motion to recess?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? There's not a second, so that motion fails for lack of a second. So we'll continue on. Is there any other questions or comments in regards to the Register of Deeds budget? Seeing none, we'll conclude the Register of Deeds departmental budget. Also want to thank Register of Deeds Natalie Strohmeyer for being present for any questions that the board may have. So we'll move on then to the next departmental budget, which is Planning, Property Lister, and Land Records Modernization Fund. Executive Harris?
The chart of staffing for planning and zoning is on page 509. They're budgeted for 14 full-time employees, the same as in 2020. And their levy is increasing $13,512 or 1.77%.
We'll go ahead and open it up for questions or comments in regards to Planning, Property Lister, and Land Records Modernization Fund. Any questions from the board or comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and conclude that departmental budget as well and move on to the Land and Water Conservation budget.
The Land and Water Conservation budget chart of employment is on page 533. They're budgeted for 7 full-time employees, the same as the prior year. Their levy is increasing $10,141 or 1.74%. And I believe Chad Casper, their new director, is available.
Very good. So we'll open it up for questions and comments in regards to the Land and Water Conservation departmental budget. Any questions in regards to the Land and Water Conservation departmental budget? I'll call on Supervisor Schneider. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Fari and I have said before. Chad Casper is new to the job. He's replacing Tom Davies, and we are darn lucky to have him. I know he's going to do a fantastic job, and somebody should just ask him a question just to take advantage of his knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Schneider. Are there any other questions or comments for the Land and Water Conservation budget? Director Casper, any comments yourself before we conclude your budget?
I do not have any. I'm just looking forward to working with the board in the future. Thank you.
Very good, and certainly appreciate your attendance and being available for comments and questions today. I'll call on Supervisor Zelmer. Please go ahead, Supervisor Zelmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for Chad. Chad, how closely is the county working with individual farmers on pollution abatement, non-point pollution abatement? Is there a close relationship, or isn't there?
That is a big priority for our department. So we have it, where our funds are available is what's kind of driving us right now. We have some dollars that are down in what we call the Winnebago watershed. They're MDV dollars that we get from the city of Fond du Lac for some point source dollars. So we're working with the farmers within that watershed right now. And we will continue to get them in compliance. We have state agricultural performance standards that farmers should be farming to. It's on a voluntary approach, but we are making one-on-one contacts with those farmers. And looking ahead to the future, we are going to be completing, they call them 9 key element plans or watershed plans. And we're fortunate enough to get almost the entire county done through the lake management planning process. So that'll be done probably early next year, and we'll be working within the highest pollutant loading sub-watersheds in those areas. So what we'll do then is probably go for grants and then working very closely with those farmers to get them in compliance with the performance standards. So that's working with maybe their cropping practices, or if they have any active erosion on their farm, we'll work with them to address those issues. But that is a big part of what our department does.
Thank you, Supervisor Elmer. And thank you, Director Casper. I don't see any other call-ins, so that'll conclude that budget. Thanks again, once again, Director Casper, for being available for questions and comments. So we'll move on to the final departmental budget of today, and that's the Solid Waste Department. Executive Harris?
The Solid Waste Department's staffing chart is on 593. They have 16 full-time employees, the same as last year. Solid Waste operates on a different basis than other departments. Its primary revenue source is tipping fees and not tax levy. And they have their own board that governs them. While they still would have some issues that fall within the greater county board, they do have their own solid waste board as well. And I believe John Robbie would probably be available for any questions.
Very good. So we'll open it up for questions and comments from the board in regards to the Solid Waste Department budget. I'll first call on Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I know we dedicated the park to Ken Roble on July 11th of 2018, and I thought that there was going to be more development than a fishing dock and a path going around a landfill. And I brought it up at the Parks Committee in a couple of months ago that there is like a wetland with a pond in there, and I thought it'd be nice to develop that and get a bench in there where people could actually watch the wildlife. And what is the solid waste intention of that's all that park's going to be? Because I haven't seen nothing done there in 2 years, and it's kind of sad. We have a piece of land, you have like $34 million, and you won't put any money into basically making and enhancing that for the citizens of Winnebago County, which that $34 million came from overcharging on trash collecting.
I'll call on Director Robbie.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Right now, the Solid Waste Board is not planning any future development at this time at the Snell Road site. The original plan was to develop the Ken Roble Conservation Park. We're working on adding some educational signage and as well as some benches at various areas of the trail. But right now we're focusing our efforts on looking at potentially developing a park at the closed portion of the Sunnyview landfill. So that's not to say that nothing else will happen at Snell Road in the future, but right now there's nothing else planned by the Solid Waste Board.
Right. You might want to look into where that wetland area is and where that pond is in there. I mean, that's a perfect place to clear a little path out and put a bench in there. And for somebody that's walking that wants to basically see the ducks, sometimes there's deer around there. You truly cannot even see that pond anymore. The vegetation has grown up so high that, you know, we sold Winnecounty Park to Winnecounty for $1 with all the lake frontage because it costs too much to maintain. And theoretically, this is still just an old landfill site that we put a trail around and a fishing bridge. You know, it's a lot for the Parks Department. I realize you pay 50% of the cost, but if we're not going to do anything else with that piece of land, it's pretty much not serving its full potential.
Okay, we'll look at least getting a bench in there, and I know I've spoke with Tom McGinnis about looking at some maintenance during the winter months, but I guess at this time the board is not planning to do any large-scale development of the park at Snell Road, so.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice if you just, like I say, put a bench in there by that wetland so people could actually sit there and see the wildlife. You can't see it from the trail, and there really is no easy access in there. So if we just cleared a little path out there, put a bench out there, it is what it's meant for, is observing wildlife. And if you can't see it from the path and there's no way of getting there to, I walked in there a ways, it's pretty wet, but we could put a path in there and it would be useful for people to enjoy the wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Albrecht. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, is Winnebago County looking for a new landfill site within this county?
Thanks for the question, Supervisor Fari. At this point in time, we're not actively looking for a new site in Winnebago County. We've been working with our partner counties, Brown and Outagamie, to give us options for future landfill airspace beyond the current term of the 3-county agreement. And we're very close to securing that as well. That's not to say in the future we won't have to look at something else inside Winnebago County's limits, but at this time we're not actively looking.
And what's your projection at what time frame will we start looking within Winnebago County?
That's a good question. At this point in time, we're probably looking at something like 2030 before we'd have to pick that back up, but until we have all our ducks in a row and the ink is dried, that's undetermined at this time.
And if you begin that search, how many acres of land would you anticipate you would be looking for that facility? What's the minimum acreage that you would need?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think we'd be looking at like a square mile. So you'd be looking at, 640 acres as optimum, depending on the parcels available. You could get by and any of the impacts, the wetland impacts or other setback requirements. You could look at something smaller, but obviously we'd want to look at as large a parcel as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht.
I just wanted to comment that Winnebago County has the most reasonable tipping fees of anybody in the state of.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Any other comments or questions in regards to the Solid Waste Department departmental budget? I'll next call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make reference to page 599. And under the Solid Waste Fund, 520, under wages, and under the third line, elected officials, object 51103. I question that there might be a housekeeping adjustment there, because the Solid Waste Board consists of citizen members and elected officials. And in as much as the Solid Waste Board pays for all of their members on the board, I wonder whether that should be appointed officials, because the executive does appoint and the board does approve. So rather than elected, it might include those other 3 citizen members as well as the 5 county board members. Am I correct, Mr. Robbie or Vicky?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Supervisor Eisen. I'd almost have to defer to
Director Fitzgerald to maybe provide comment on that 51103. Whether there's other options for a title or we're just using kind of a canned existing account.
We are looking at it right now. If you could just hold on for one moment, but it's definitely the elected officials, and I know we may use that account in another department as well. So that might be why the name is off, and we can definitely change names.
It looks like it's
just one moment.
got O'Brien.
Okay.
It's all $50 charges.
Okay, it's all $50 charges. Does that happen for your citizens as well?
Yes, it does.
So I'd have to know names of
I can't.
your board to know the difference.
Yeah, and we
So-
can change that.
We can definitely change that to appointed officials, because it looks like it could
It's just-
include more. Again, I would need all your board member names so we can see if other people got paid there. So I'd have to look into it and get back to you.
Sure, and just by the name you mentioned, O'Brien, he's a appointed citizen member. He's our chairman, so. It
Okay,
looks
well,
like all-
then that definitely answers our question.
Yeah, so. we can-
So they're in there as well. So we will change that account going forward in the system to appointed officials.
Very good.
Attention to details.
Excellent.
Thanks for bringing it up, Supervisor Eisen. I think it's a valid point, so appreciate it. Any other comments or questions in regards to the Solid Waste Department departmental budget? Seeing none, we'll conclude that budget, and thank you, Director Robbie, for being available and for answering questions. Very much appreciated today.
Okay, thank you
So-
very much.
Thank you. So that actually concludes our departmental budget reviews for today. It actually it completes our 2021 county budget review. And just as a reminder of the process, since we finished the review today, that would mean that we would first reconvene tomorrow at 4 p.m. Just as a reminder as the timelines for amendments. So as soon as you have an amendment, please forward them to finance today if possible, but you have up until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning to do so. Finance will be working on all those amendments, and they will distribute them to the county board as well as to the public by 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, so that there's some advance time before we actually meet at 4. The only other thing I would add in regards to the amendment, especially given the unique nature of this year, just would want to remind the board of making sure to avoid any potential risk of a walking quorum, okay? And so what that could entail that you might not consider is if you were discussing an amendment with 3 or more people from any committee, or potentially even co-sponsorship of 3 people from any committee, because in order to be co-sponsors, you would have to reach out to them. That could constitute a walking quorum. So I'm just putting that out there for all to consider, and as a reminder, frankly, to everyone of what that means, and for us all to avoid that as we consider amendments and put them forward. So with that, any questions before we adjourn? I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Well, how do you propose that supervisors would caucus to put together a reasonable amendment to this budget? You're tying our hands with a walking quorum.
In no way am I attempting to tie your hands. I am trying to make you aware of the law. And that's what the law says. So it's not me tying your hands, it's what the law is. I'll next call on Supervisor Zelmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Please go ahead.
I would like to take, being a new supervisor, I really appreciate the glossary of terms, because that's helped me immensely It's helped with some of the questions that I might have had. So I don't know who put it together, but it's very good. Thank you very much. That's it.
You're very welcome, and that's a credit. While we worked as a group, that's really a credit to the clerk and the finance director and the corporation counsel in particular.
Thumbs up.
Our next call on Supervisor Lenz. Please go ahead, Supervisor Lenz.
Chairman Ramos. First off, I just want to thank everyone for putting this together. But second, I may pull back my comment if council is not here. I was looking to see if there's any way to address Supervisor Eisen's question around caucusing that would not be seen as a walking quorum, but would also allow us to do it during this very abbreviated time frame. But I don't, is she on?
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Corporation Counsel, are you on the line? I know we're working to get her on the line if she's
And I
not.
apologize, Chairman Ramos, I cannot hear you if it appears you're speaking.
Can you hear me, Supervisor Lenz? So we are working to get the Corporation Counsel on the line to advise you of what you can and cannot do in regards to the potential for a walking quorum. So bear with us just for a minute so that we have her available.
Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes, I can hear you, Supervisor Powers.
I was wondering if Steve Lenz could hear me. I don't think he can hear.
No, it doesn't appear that he can. He was able to earlier, but something must have changed on his end that makes it difficult for him to hear. We're just giving a little bit of a moment for the Corporation Counsel to be available to advise in regards to the walking quorum. And just for everyone's awareness, the Corporation Counsel is logging in right now, so she should be available shortly. So the Corporation Counsel is now on the line. Corporation Counsel? So the Corporation Counsel is on the call. We're resolving an audio issue. Maybe if you put her by the mic.
Yeah.
Go ahead and speak, Corporation Counsel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
And there
I
were
am hearing
questions?
echoing. There's feedback and echoing, but go ahead. My understanding is you guys have a question regarding discussions of amendments.
Yes, and how it could or could not constitute a walking quorum and what they're able to do in terms of speaking to a fellow county supervisor about a potential amendment.
Okay. First of all, I would suggest that the supervisor submit the amendment on their own, and they basically avoid discussions on the amendment until you're on the board floor or in the meeting, because you don't want to have any debates under the surface, and that's exactly what could happen. You don't want to violate the open meetings law. So my suggestion would be that the supervisor submit whatever amendment they're proposing, and again, avoid all basically discussions regarding the amendment until you're on the floor and it is open to the public. So you can avoid violating any kind of open meetings law.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel. I see one question. I'll call on Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
So Attorney Miller, does that mean that it only goes just to Shiloh and to Sue, that amendment, or can it be sent out to everyone so that other supervisors know ahead of time what that amendment might be?
I think it is fine that once the amendment is submitted, that it can get submitted to the entire board, so the entire board knows what's going on. But again, what we want to avoid is any kind of discussion under the surface that would undermine the open meetings law.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
It's my assessment of the Corporation Council's advice that it's very unrealistic. I would point to the fact that a walking quorum represents a committee, a majority of a committee. So if you had, say, 19 supervisors getting together, you've got a walking quorum of the county board. If you've got 3 of the 5 judiciary committee members together, you've got a walking quorum, you got a majority of that. But if I want to talk to Supervisor X and ask him what he thinks, if he wants to sign on to my amendment, I should have the right to do that. And if Supervisor X particularly is not on any committee that I have, how could I establish a walking quorum?
And Supervisor Eisen, the problem is there are many of the supervisors on various committees, and they may unknowingly be speaking to supervisors who would make up quorums of committees that they're already on. You gave the example of the Judiciary Committee. There are 5 members. If you have 3 of those members sign on to one of your amendments,
I won't do that. I won't be that stupid.
But Supervisor Eisen, you're one of 36 people, and maybe some others might not be as cognizant of the facts that you may be. So to avoid any issues, that might be the best way to do it.
I'm going to call on Supervisor
More
Wingren.
than one supervisor on one amendment.
I'm recognizing Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very proper question was asked. We have a corporation counsel who's an expert at these things. who advises us and tries to keep us on the straight and narrow, we need to listen to her. Simple as that. Listen to what our attorney says. There's no need to have any question about walking quorums. It's very easy. Submit a proposed budget amendment if you wish, and it will go out to everybody. We'll be able to see it and then discuss it tomorrow. Very easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wimber. And Supervisor Lenz, did you have anything further?
Hand raised.
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
So just for clarification, I think I heard what council said. So if Paul were to reach out to me and I were to reach out to two additional members on one of his committees, that would possibly be seen as a walking quorum, assuming that that was a majority on one of his committees, even though his intentions would not have been to reach out to any other committee members of his own. But I could accidentally draw us into a quorum. Is that an accurate understanding?
That is correct. That is exactly what the concern is.
Thank you.
Basically, if you have the supervisor whose idea it is to sign off on the amendment, and then the proposal is dispersed to the entire county of board, you avoid any appearance of impropriety. There is no suggestion of debating under the surface and not giving the public the right to know.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. And Director Fitzgerald, you had one comment. Please go ahead.
I did. When Supervisor Powers was speaking, she mentioned about how to hand in amendments, and it sounded like she said that she would just email them to the full board. I just want to make sure they understand the process, that it comes to me, I get it to corporate counsel, and the county clerk will get them emailed out and posted on the website by 2 p.m. tomorrow, just so we're getting them all the right way so we can get them processed.
Very good. Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a reasonable question. And the question is, how could you ever have two supervisors sign on to an amendment and not having had it discussed between two people? That's impossible. You can never have, if we take that advice, we're saying you can never have two people sign on to an amendment because you talked to somebody else about it. That makes no sense.
Supervisor Eisen, if I may, the issue is not two. Typically, your committees are 5. You would have a quorum if you have 3 people. That's the issue. And again, I think to make it clean and to avoid any issue, you have the person whose idea it is submit the amendment, and then it's dispersed to the remaining 35 county board supervisors. And then during the open debate period on the floor, that's when they can say, gee, I'd like to join Supervisor Eisen's amendment.
Well, you find me for talking to Supervisor Fari. Go ahead.
All right. So I think the Corporation Council has done the best she could to give the advice under the circumstances. So we are finished with our business for today. So I will call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn to tomorrow at 4 p.m. Supervisor Albrecht.
We adjourn until 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
There's a motion, then there's a second. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. We are adjourned until 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, everyone. You have a good rest of the day.